Good evening, everybody. First of all, I apologize for Wednesday's stream. I'm sure you can hear from my voice. I'm not quite recovered from the. I haven't quite recovered from the illness, but I do, where I can, I do want to do a proper run of everything. I also feel like my mic is too loud. Just give me a second here. Sorry about that. I have a feeling that Google Voice might be messing with it. At least one of the apps is probably messing with the volume for the voice. So hopefully this isn't too hot now, but I also don't want it to be too quiet. Anyway, I've been talking so much about how there aren't a lot of holidays on the way and how I'm hoping for that to be a little bit of regularity in terms of the broadcast. And every time I say that, there seems to be something that gets in the way, particularly with sickness. So I am trying to take better care of myself. I do think part of it is, I'm trying to fit the balance of work as well as the the broadcasts. And sometimes that, if I go too late, I maybe won't get enough sleep, and that does tend to they add that up over a couple of days. And you have a recipe for getting sick. Of course, it's also been quite a bit colder, which isn't exactly a recipe for being healthy if you're not getting enough sleep. And then I think everybody's finding that generally with the news, if you read that somewhat regularly, it's very easy to get caught in the trap of just scrolling into the next thing. So I always need to acknowledge, I always sort of think for myself, like, not streaming when you're sick is a completely justifiable reason not to do it. But I do think it's important to be accountable for sort of the things that I'm doing to, I don't know, like, if I keep getting sick, so maybe here's one thing I'd say, like, if at my job people said, hey, you seem to be getting sick a whole lot, like, what's up with that? Or I'm taking, more than whatever the allotted days are. There's going to be a serious conversation about my ability to do the job, and a justifiable discussion. Like, obviously there are provisions for cases where people are, hit by some kind of critical condition. But just in terms of, like, a rash of sick days can sometimes be a signal of something else going on. And I actually did my taxes recently. Like, as far as the streaming is concerned, I kind of know how much of my income as a whole this brings in. And actually, this was an interesting year because there's a portion on the tax form that talks about how much is brought in through a website, so like Twitch, for instance, and how much is brought in through other deals. And this time around, I was actually surprised to see how much of that compensation was from things that are not Twitch, which of course is not a sub, that's not like a sub request or anything like that. But the thing is that, like, doing an accounting exercise like that can be very helpful, just in terms of reminding yourself that, like, yes, it's a hobby, but, I didn't choose, like, so I didn't have, like, okay, I sort of had affiliate foisted on me because it was the way to get transcodes, but, like, setting up the donation button, right? You can do PayPal donations, or setting up something like, an affiliate status and paying for emotes, all that sort of stuff. The fact of the matter is like that's a choice. I've a streamer I'm actually quite fond of, Kite 260, and he's got a wonderful channel, a wonderful community, and he has not put his stream on an affiliate status, and he's declined to put up a donation button. And for him, he specifically does not want there to be a any kind of a monetary component to his broadcast. For whatever reason, and I'm sure like if people were interested, I could kind of go into the arguments for and against asking for a donation or putting up the subscription button. And I think I've been pretty open. Like, I don't actually think that the Twitch affiliate program is a good thing. I did it so that I could get the transcodes. But my revenue from this stream went down by more than half as soon as that switch happened. And there's a really easy reason to see why. There is maybe an outlier reason, which is, it's purely speculative, and I want to at least acknowledge that. But the big thing is that under the old system, which was purely donation, people would donate what they thought was right. I think like the default is a ridiculous number because I just never changed the default from whatever it was, way back when I originally set it up. But like it's never with an expectation that people will pay. Actually, I think somebody says like I was going to donate, and then I saw what the number was in the default. I was like, I don't even know what that number is now. Like, obviously you donate whatever you want. But one of the reasons why I haven't actually gone in to change it is that actually seems like a decent mechanism, right? Like, I'd rather people think about what the stream is worth to them, because like, it's not like people are going to look at that default and say, oh, I should do $500 now, whatever the, they're going to look at that and say, presumably whatever number they had in mind at the start, or at the very least, they're going to reflect on whatever they think it's worth and put it in there. Like, I don't imagine there's a situation where people pay more than what they think is appropriate. And if someone has, like, I'd actually really like to hear that, because I don't, it's a little bit like the mid-roll ads. YouTube's been pretty clear in terms of how much more I can make by putting the mid-roll ads on, but I don't know, like, I don't like it myself when I see streams, and I don't make a living doing this. I can't imagine a situation where I would make a living doing this. So, if in the end the principal beneficiary of those mid-roll ads is Google, then why on earth would I turn those on? But again, like I also have my own reasons in terms of like allowing monetization in the first place, right? Like, I don't think there's a lot of value in pretending that, oh yeah, it's just about the games and the community, because, you do have the option to turn that stuff on. And clearly I took it. But yeah, I don't know. Like, it's just one of these things. So, I didn't want to go on too much about the finances stuff, but like, anyways, the reason why I said the affiliate thing is that, under that other model, people were exercising some thought into what support for the stream looks like. Whereas under the affiliate program, leaving aside Twitch's cut, which is 50%, it is built into this entire marketing strategy that they have of saying that a stream is worth $5. And, I wrote an article which I don't think is necessarily going to be the most popular one that I've ever written. I mean, this is an old article, so it's already been published now. But it sort of talked about this idea of like, so like if every game is effectively a monopoly, like why don't we see more, weird pricing? So like to a certain extent, like Cyberpunk 2077, right? There is exactly one company you can buy Cyberpunk 2077 from, and that is CD Projekt Red. Now, they will place it on storefronts, right? I'm playing the GOG version because I was given a key by, for both Cyberpunk and 2077 and Phantom Liberty. And because they run that storefront, they don't need to pay the the store's share. But this game is available on Epic, and this game is available on Steam, and I think it's available on the Microsoft Store. I actually don't know offhand. But for those other platforms, they pay a fee to the storefront. But of course, that fee is sorry, I'm going to hit the audio a little bit lower just because I'm testing the edge of the volume. I think it's kind of okay where it was, but I was always getting near the edge of zero, and I felt nervous about it. But yeah, anyways, in the end, that's like a shelving fee, right? You are still buying the game from CD Projekt Red. It just happens to be that like Steam is the intermediary through which you get it. So, what stops CD Projekt Red from charging, $1,000 for Cyberpunk 2077? Well, one answer is there's not a lot of people who see a game as being worth $1,000 up front, at least compared to the number of people who see it, worth that much at, $60, $70, depending on what your regional price is. It's probably closer to 70 at this point. Like there's the $60 price tag really held on for a while, but I think we've fairly hit a point where inflation has finally started to move from that very long like the price for games, and for a while there was like all the deluxe editions and stuff like that, which were sort of blurring the lines, but like I think the default of like $59.99 held for a really long time, basically since Elder Scrolls 4. I can't think of any other product that's really held that kind of value, and that's purely because of DLC. Like it's effectively these incremental transactions were the way that games were valued, at that default base price for such a long time. Anyways, but yeah, so like the thing is that there's probably, while the number is too low for CD Projekt Red, the thing is that I think there are more people who would actually spend $1,000 to play Cyberpunk 2077 than most people realize. And some of that's just a function of people's income, right? There are some actually very wealthy people for whom, $1,000 would be considerably more than they had paid for a video game normally. But, this was an absolutely massive release, like in terms of just anticipation. There are people who want to experience something like that. All the goodwill built up from The Witcher 3, for instance. And as a fraction of their income, it's just a negligible amount, right? There are some people who think spending 4 figures on clothing is like not just appalling, like, or obscene in terms of a personal expenditure, but like find it immoral that such an amount could ever be spent on apparel in relation to whatever problems there are in the world. And the world is not fair is basically the answer to that, right? Like we do live with tremendous income disparities, and I say that with the full knowledge that I am one of the very advantaged when we're talking on a global scale. So, but the price that CD Projekt Red sets is based on the fact that there is an entire, like they need to consider the global market. If there was a thing called price discrimination, what CD Projekt Red could do, and like in theory, CD Projekt Red is like one of the third or fourth best position to be able to do this because they do run the storefront GOG. And what you would take is basically all of the consumer information. Steam is obviously the best position for this, and arguably Microsoft too, because they have a lot of other consumer data. But, among a subset of these storefronts, you have a bunch of data on your customers, and you can come up with a decent estimate of their willingness to pay. And effectively, each individual account is charged some value, close to the estimated willingness to pay. And of course, what would happen here is that more of what's called the consumer surplus would go towards the game developer, but that would still be considered in economic terms an optimal allocation. The only thing that people would sort of feel is unjust is sort of the distribution of the surplus. But, in the end, people are ultimately not going to pay for the thing that they don't value. So if that model gets it wrong, right, if they say that you'd be willing to spend $89 and you're actually only willing to spend $50, you just simply won't buy Cyberpunk. So, of course, if that were to ever actually happen, people would be... Sorry, and hi, Zerog, I don't remember if I actually said that or if I just thought it when I saw your introduction. I should have maybe started with just chatting to do this little rant at the start, but I'll get near the end soon. Yes, I mean, the reason we won't see this sort of thing, first of all, is that I think when Amazon tried this, there was outrage. There was also price discrimination in terms of people. I think there were airlines setting different ticket prices based on the type of OS or browser that people were using. So, like if you're using Safari, that means you're on an Apple device. And as a consequence, they would charge you more because generally people who have Apple stuff are willing to pay more. Whether or not that's for devices, that's apparently true for plane tickets. Otherwise, they would have changed the policy. And again, eventually people caught wise, and then they'd either, they'd switch to a Linux VM to order their tickets or any number of other factors. But this sort of stuff has been tried in practice, and generally the consumer reaction to it is very negative. Hello, Jamie. How are you doing tonight? But the reason why that's a useful model to keep in mind, even if it's something that in practical terms probably wouldn't be implemented or at least would be obfuscated to a certain degree, you can think of the various pricing strategies in terms of DLC, roadmaps, season passes, and also discounts to be a form of price discrimination. So while I think people would object strongly to sort of the prices that are applied to your Steam account versus, someone else's Steam account, there is a certain point where, the people who are the most enthusiastic, like the super fans of a game, they're the ones who actually get the worst version of the game because it's the one before all the patches, but they pay the top price because they want to play that on launch, and sometimes even before launch. In the case of, a lot of games are doing pre-order bonuses of, play the game a few days in advance. I don't know why I say it's a pre-order bonus. I don't see how it could be anything but a pre-order bonus, obviously. But those are going to be the people who pay the most. And then, of course, you can say we have large Steam libraries, and so most of us are willing to wait. But the fact of the matter is, when you take a look at big new releases, or even some indie releases, there's a bunch of people who buy on day one. And it's ultimately because again, this is one of these cases where I can sound insensitive in terms of income levels. And I'm conscious of this just because I am actually aware of a very broad... I'm kind of aware of a very broad, income range. I'm reasonably lucky in the sense that, it's not just that I have a professional job, but, I have a degree in economics, which is generally a more employable degree. And, I think probably now most people are at a point where I shouldn't say most people, but definitely in my case, there is the open question in terms of, certainty of a job, right? I wouldn't get a mortgage, if I could right now, because there's a level of uncertainty. But the fact of the matter is I'm doing okay. On the scale of economists, probably not as well as I could be doing, but in terms of overall outcomes for someone, the number of years out of university that I am, I'd say I'm doing okay. Whereas I know for some people, like I've talked with a few viewers who have had extended periods of unemployment, and like to a point where, they've sort of given up. Like I don't want this to sound judgmental on the individual, but like to a point where one of the things sort of accelerating the length of the job search is giving up on the prospect of having a job, like to just feeling a level of futility and hopelessness that they're not as applying as much as before because it feels like a waste of time and it is too discouraging. So, I always want to be. I realize I take too long on these kinds of disclaimers, but like when talking about sort of, I don't know, median tastes, I always think there's value in sort of acknowledging that there is going to be that median, there is going to be that middle ground that might be considered representative of whatever we would consider to be an average experience, keeping in mind that the average may not be salient in some of these discussions, while also acknowledging that average does not mean everyone sees it. In fact, I think it would be fair in most cases where you apply the average, it doesn't apply to anyone. In like price index theory, you have the representative basket of goods, and yet you're not going to find someone who's ordering feminine hygiene products and Axe body spray. Like those are, I mean, maybe ironically or something like that, but like that consumer doesn't really exist. It's, or like photo finishing services. There's going to be some fragment of the population that is contributing to that part of the basket, or at least used to. I don't know if photo finishing is removed from it, but I think it would be fair to say in the age of digital cameras, most people have a value of 0 for that, whereas the representative basket would have some fractional value because, again, you're choosing a representative number for an entire population. Anyways, back to the point. The reason why you'll see people buy stuff on day one, and I say this as somebody who got, Civilization, I pre-ordered Civilization, I guess, back in 2024, so, but this was, back in, or like, this is because Civilization has effectively been gaming for me. I haven't really, I don't think there's, since I started playing Civilization, I don't think there's one in that series that I've missed, and it's one that I'm probably going to want to make my own decisions on, regardless of what the reviews say. So, is it foolish? Is it irrational of me to pre-order Civ, so sight unseen? I don't know how good the game is. And more importantly, I'm buying it prior to all the updates, all of the things that make it better and make it the brilliant new entry in the series that, everybody's going to say is ruined when Civ 8 comes along. Well, no, because there's a value to playing the new Civilization when it comes out, that maybe people who don't like the title as much aren't going to, like, they're not going to assign that value to it, but there is actually some value to people who really like certain things. That's what the full price is for. So, in the end, what this stuff becomes is like, you could consider that there's some like average price for the game for the representative consumer, and it's probably somewhere between the base price, which is the price on launch, or maybe minus 10% in the case of some indie releases. And then there's maybe not even the lowest discount that it gives, but let's maybe say the discount that it happens after 2 years, because I think you'll also notice that like the percentage discount drops very, very slowly now. I'll give an example. In the case of Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. So that game was released in 2019, right? So that game's almost 6 years old to the day. It was released, I think, the end of March. So that on Steam, March 21st, 2019. So 6 years, almost the 6th anniversary of the release of Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. That's 50% off. Um, Now you can contrast that to some of the stuff that you see during Steam sales, where it's like 90% off. Again, that was admittedly kind of an old-fashioned way of looking at it. Like there's not as many of the. I mean, Ubisoft will do that for a few of their older titles now, but in general, those are considered really exceptional deals right now. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of what price discrimination looks like in an indirect way. And more of that is sort of based on, willingness to pay relative to either the initial buzz or in some cases the the excitement and word of mouth of the game. Another example of a game that actually handles this quite well is RimWorld, which avoided going on a discount for the longest time. And then I think in order to I think this was a smart choice on their part. I think they ultimately realized that in order to participate in certain Steam events, having a discount would help bring attention to the title. And so they kind of get these nominal discounts. I think maybe 20% is like the lowest that it goes. But then, the new DLC for it and such, those are, 10, 20% as well. And I mean, for those, the funny thing is that consumer behavior is weird because like for RimWorld, that's like $4 or $5. But for Ludon, like applying that to all customers, that's actually serious money. So you can see why like they would be reluctant to do that, despite the fact that apparently for the $4 or $5, there are people who have actually denied themselves playing RimWorld for such a long time. So, anyways, long story short, the old model for Twitch sort of allowed for something equivalent to how how game discounts work. If you're like a super fan, you buy at the premium price and you cherish the game because it meant something to you. And when you think it's okay, you're interested, you pay the whatever you think the value of the discount is. If you want to buy like Sekiro Shadows Die Twice for $3, chances are you're never going to be able to buy it for that. And so, that's you watch the stream, you don't pay anything. But the affiliate model kind of killed that because, again, Twitch has an entire business model built around sort of creating a one-size-fits-all value for streams. And built into the platform, right? If somebody donates something, there's no in-channel reward for that. If you do it on Twitch, you get the emotes and so on and so forth. And so that's kind of why you see this outsized, like a discount of more than just the amount that Twitch takes in terms of the amounts. It's actually specifically the fact that they have a different business model that now all the Twitch streamers conform into. So, but all of that to say, the original purpose of this analogy was to sort of explain the sicknesses and to try and account for why I want to try and get on top of that. If I was at my workplace having a number of sick days in a row, there'd definitely be a conversation of like, what's up? Is there something we need to talk about? Is there something, you need? Is there special conditions, accommodations, or whatever? And if there aren't, then the conversation is going to be like, okay, this is now becoming a performance issue. And likewise for streaming, I'm trying not to go into another 20-minute rant on this, but like the choice to put up a sub button or to have a donation button down below, like that is a choice. That's not forced on me. Again, the transcoding thing left aside. So I don't want to take it for granted. And, again, it's completely excusable to have a sick day. But also just reflecting on some of the conditions under which I've been getting sick, I do wonder if there's just a better way of, getting better sleep, trying to keep more regular hours. And maybe that'll just mean like if I start a stream late, like ending the stream on time so that I can have, a proper night's sleep, get up at a proper hour, go to work on time, finish work on time, when I'm home, you know, have the time to do my stuff, and then just go to bed at the proper time. Easier said than done, but mostly I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that even when I'm getting excited for extended periods of time where there aren't going to be Canadian holidays to break up the streams, I'm sort of failing to deliver. Okay, so assuming I haven't completely alienated everyone, sorry, I just need a quick second to make sure all the settings are up. Assuming I haven't completely alienated everybody with the long rant, which is not directly related to Cyberpunk. I want to do so. I'm not feeling as completely like I'm not feeling as worn out as I was last week when I did this. I'll do a couple of side quests to start, mostly just because there's so many of them and it's actually quite easy to do. But depending on where the night goes, maybe we will we'll consider some of the main story as well. And I'm curious, so one of the things that happened, for those of you that didn't get to see, on Wednesday I started to stream and I ran, so it was a really crummy way of doing it, if I'm honest. I started the stream, you know, started it late because I was getting started late, and did Doom Eternal. And the big problem with that was after about 15 minutes, it was clear that I was running into frame rate problems. Like to a point where it's like, okay, I think I might be able to manage this. It's kind of like going into Dogtown and sort of accepting. It's like, okay, this is just, you know, this part of the game, it's going to be a little rough, but, you know, we'll persevere. Versus, you know, okay, this is really bad. Like, it doesn't... Oh. It's my opportunity to buy a new car. A few more tiger claws here than I'd like there to be, but... So I mostly just wanted to get them to a position where they're not noticing the body. All right, I'm gonna do something reckless here. Well, nuts. I always thought if you shot on the diamond, there was going to be something that happened. I forget how that mechanic works now. Meh. Alright, that's not a huge surprise. I've been carrying a lot of crap. So I'll grab the last of this before we make the move. Anyway, sorry. I think I was talking about the. I think I made the choice that I wasn't going to wear any headgear. I was talking about the Doom stream or lack thereof. So yeah, the big challenge was that basically, so I wasn't feeling 100% at the start. So the mistake was originally streaming full stop. And then, but you hit the start streaming button, so you live with the consequences. But then the other challenge was once I hit that frame rate issue, it's like, okay, well, this might have a fix. Like, chances are if I reset the computer, it's going to be ready to go. But if I'm not feeling 100%, and I now have to create this seam in the middle of the broadcast, and I haven't done that much. And yeah, like basically, if you haven't gotten so invested into the game, it's embarrassing to announce a stream and then pull that away. But I don't know, it seemed better than like trying to struggle for an hour after resetting things. But where I can, I'm gonna try and keep that stuff to a minimum. Well, that's inconvenient, given the mayhem that's happening in the... This feels like Just Cause at this point. Alright, you know what? Obviously, any hope of bringing this thing in one piece is done, so... I will admit, oops. Sorry. I will... Alright. Not great. I'm actually about to get caught. Say I've got the minute before, alright. Definitely not great. Oh. Yeah, that's not great. Okay, so what I was originally going to say was I kind of like it when it gets a little crazy like this, just because, I don't know, it's fun, it's chaotic, it's more like the GTA Cyberpunk scenario. But the drawback is that these missions almost always have another condition, like deliver on time. And generally I found if you alert the police, you're never going to get the on time reward. So I mean, this I wasn't going to make just because I didn't get there on time.
I guess it'll do, V. Switch up your game. Try a little harder next time. My man will take care of the rest.
I think I remember when we were playing, what was it? Outlast Trials. Fine Canadian game by Red Barrels. One of the things that really amused, like I genuinely felt bad for the person because they really, like, you could see exactly where the response was going to go, but it's also hard not to find that funny. But there was like, so in the case of the Outlast Trials, for those of you not familiar with it, you have you're sort of these individuals who usually through circumstances, social circumstances, you're either, you don't have family, you're unemployed, the sort of people that tend not to get noticed when they go missing, are introduced in these experiments, the Murkoff experiments. And it's, clearly intended to be some sort of brainwashing or the sort of stuff that you would normally associate with the bad guys of the Outlast series. And of course, the trials are absolutely horrible, and they involve, intense violence and, terrifying the people involved. And it's pretty much what you would expect for an Outlast game, right? Like, it'd be the sort of thing where I don't know why it got louder all of a sudden, but yeah, like, it's basically, you play the Outlast games because they just show you horrible things, and there is a certain side of us that likes being grossed out and horrified by our entertainment products. But what I thought was really amusing is that, you kind of know what you're getting into when it comes to an Outlast game. But one thing that does happen is, because you have this very, autocratic experimenter, kind of imagine a Stanford prison experiment on steroids sort of a figure. You have a grade at the end of your performance, and if you do well, you have this very obsessive praise about you becoming perfect or something like that. And if you don't do well, sorry, I'm gonna try and redeem myself for the appalling performance last time. Oops. Well, looks like I'm doing this the hard way. Which one's my car? Oh, that's not my car. Actually, I'm pretty sure I just lost it. Oh, maybe not. Definitely not the one that I wanted. Yes, let the police take care of it. Oh, the police didn't like that.
Great. Now grab the delivery cords and drive.
Oh, sorry, it's taken me forever to get a story out today. Oh my god.
So chop chop, we're on down a client.
Okay. So I'm gonna try and give him the slip. We're close to doing it, but
I'm very sorry.
okay. It's weird that sometimes driving through a crowd can be the optimal strategy when trying to avoid the police. But yeah, anyway, so you have this experiment. If you do well, you get the huge praise. But if you do poorly, obviously you've got a harsh taskmaster. They're going to let you know that they're very disappointed with you. And I completely sympathize with what this poster was saying on Steam, which is basically like, look, I already feel bad enough about, losing the mission. Like, why do I have to get an earful from the game telling me what a terrible person I am? And of course, it's the Steam forums, so you're not going to hear a bunch of people say, yeah, I sympathize, just realize, it's a game and it sort of takes place in a certain fantasy, and that fantasy isn't always about nice things. No, it's going to be LOL, you suck at the game, just get good or whatever it is. And this is the thing, right? I think it's a bad thing that the Steam forums are this way. I think there is a way of maybe not agreeing that the game should change the way that the poster wants to, but maybe at least being able to appreciate where they come from and sort of see, is there a way to retain the player fantasy while also not rubbing salt in the wound for what might be a rather disappointing outcome? Or, at the very least, just sort of saying is like, I understand this might be true for you, but in general, like, we think this is kind of in line with what we'd want to see inside of a game. But, we don't live in that world.
Oh, yeah, I knew I picked the right merc for the gig. Thanks for the help, V. My chum will do the finishing touches.
Although, again, there is something kind of amusing about the fact that it's like you can electrocute, you can imprison, you can disembowel, like you can do anything to the player, just don't diss them. Whatever you do. Okay, what I'm going to try and do here is, I don't want to give up too much stuff, but I think what I might do is let's sort you by weight. So I need 13. It's like ditching this kind of stuff is probably best. Okay. That's not the end of the... Not the end of the divestment, just I want to sell the rest of it because I value money a little bit more right now. Okay. So I think I'm going to sort by type first. Yeah, so like we have the two Achilles here. And actually both of them have the non-lethal. So we've got a 20 and 7.5. Yeah, so this is clearly the one I want to sell. I don't think I'm going to try and be a bit of a hoarder on this, and I'll keep I'll keep one of each. I don't really know if I need 2 non-lethal mods, but yeah, at least for a first pass. So I don't really... Oh, sorry, I was going to say headshots from shotguns, but no, that's the skull enemies. Okay. We'll go for the ones with more toys. But yeah, so my start here is basically just one of each type. And then preference to, well, so obviously hang on to anything sort of legendary or iconic rather. But also if I have more than one, right, so I've got the Yakamura here and 2 Yakamuras here. Actually, I think it's the 4th as well. We'll get rid of this one. And then between these two, tempting for both. Lower homing probability, I think I would put... Okay. I'm not crazy about the doubled up non-lethals, but I don't really know what to do about those yet. So any Lexingtons that aren't 4 we need to get rid of. Slightly more inclined for the 2 purples. So the other tricky thing is I should technically be stripping out all of the components and then you know, and then evaluating what I've got in my inventory, but that strikes me as a really time-consuming process that I just don't think I'm actually going to take the time to realize the benefits of, so. If I can, I like the idea of switching to completely non-lethal weapons. I'm sure I can probably already equip some of that stuff, but again, if I get the choice between 2. Okay, I think we're at the end of these. Now, so it's kind of funny, I guess not all baseball bats are the same. This is going to be a hard one. So, okay, let's go for the easy ones. Anything that isn't orange gets sold. This is some easier preliminaries. So my baseball bat is already non-lethal, but cool. Yeah, so we won't go for the lethal baseball bat. I'm actually slightly... I mean, I don't actually think I'm going to wind up using any of these anyway. Okay, so we got 2 gamma batons. 40% chance for a crit's definitely a nice one. I think I prefer the mod on this one, though. Oh, we cleaned out the vendor. Probably should have thought of that before I went too far on the path. All right, that's fine. We'll just find another... We'll find another spot for that. So I'll try to do that a little more regularly for the simple reason that if I can like buy up all the cars that that I have access to, then I go buying the apartments. But once I have those, there isn't quite the same need to go crazy on the money. And you know, from there, obviously, the components and all of that becomes a higher priority. Or at the very least, if I'm looking for money, I'm like specifically, like I'm constantly earning them without a drawdown until I find, you know, a piece of cyberware that I want. And, you know, hopefully the progression through the game will, hopefully the limits that you have on your cyberware will keep me from getting too excessive on that. Oh, do I do this again? I think I do. Yoink!
Units report. Opening fire.
Oh god. This was very poorly planned. Anyway, sorry, I think there was one thing I wanted to say about Doom Eternal, which was, you know, that was kind of the second day in the row I tried. And I'm curious if there was interest in that or not. Like, I'm intrigued by the game, but I can also enjoy that on my own time. I don't mind Cyberpunk being a Friday game as it used to be. I think there's enough interest in the topics of the game, although I'll confess I haven't been really engaging with them all that deeply tonight. But it's a little funny in the sense that it's a game that sort of has the RPG elements to make it potentially interesting to the you know, the audience who likes my more usual stuff. But it's also an RPG that's sort of unlike the normal thing that I do. Like, obviously, I think some people will consider it more of a first-person shooter. And again, you've got my view of it, which is it's basically Grand Theft Auto with a more in-depth character progression system. Although that's obviously unfair to the first. Like, Grand Theft Auto 5 is a really impressive game in terms of its longevity and how it's kept people going. And actually, I should maybe specifically say Grand Theft Auto Online. But I don't know. I'm not entirely sure the first-person shooter mode is the one that people sort of say is the... Like, I feel comparing Cyberpunk's first-person to Grand Theft Auto's would be inappropriate. But I don't know, I kind of like, I guess one of the little thought experiments I like to do for games, I think I've said something similar to this before, but you know, when you play a game, it's sometimes fun to imagine, you know, what did the team think when they were getting ready to do this? So I didn't really appreciate this because I don't play enough idle games, and I think maybe if I played the JavaScript prototype of Cultist Simulator, I would have appreciated this more. But what I didn't really appreciate about Cultist Simulator at the time was how closely the game resembled an idle game in a lot of ways. And actually, I think the thing that's kind of funny about it is that even, you know, now on the subreddit, you'll see people write these complaints about Cultist Simulator talking about, you know, the grind or, you know, it demanding too much by killing you. And, you know, again, it's like the Outlast thing, right? Like, you know, I kind of deep down want to be the heel and be like, LOL, you know, get smart. Like, I kind of understand, like, especially when people have talked about how into the game they are, and you want to see what all the excitement is about, and you realize that, you know, the time that you put into your run is now gone, and what it's doing is it's giving you the foundations for your subsequent runs so that you don't make those mistakes again. But that you are actually going to have to put some effort into getting all those things again. Like, that is a lot to ask a certain type of gamer. Now, I think it's kind of an academic question because the game has got enough of a loyal fan base that it's fair to say that, you know, it's connected with the people it intended to connect to. But especially I think Weather Factory would probably like to sell more games than less. And so when they think about their subsequent games, probably they do want to take those criticisms on board, or at least decide which ones they feel are, incompatible with the types of experiences they want to create for their existing audience. Right, so like I want to see, a 1990s, early 2000s style first-person shooter set in the Secret History setting. Succession has this wonderful line, yeah, and I'd like an onion to taste like a peach, but there you go. That maybe would be realized as a Sixth History project, assuming that they could work out terms with Weather Factory that would allow them to make the amount of revenue that, makes a project like that worthwhile. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, I think had I had a better appreciation of idle games, I'd like to think that, maybe given a broad enough.
There you go. Yet another media killed herself. Scream sheets are saying it was work-related stress, but her folks are calling it foul play. So, think you can dig something up? Got more deets attached.
Okay, thievery, steals CCTV footage, Memorial Park Station, something's rotten in the city of dreams, a series of suicides, a rash of self-destruction, the contagion mostly targets politicians, corpos, journalists, and police officers. The latest victim was Zoli Barnes, a journalist who fell onto the tracks at Memorial Park Station. Her death was officially ruled a suicide, but Barnes' parents say that she went to meet one of her informants at the station and that she never would have taken her own life. I know, that's what all parents say. Seems like the jury's still out. Nobody really knows what happened because every last shred of CCTV footage was wiped clean. Her parents tracked down the witnesses, but they didn't want to talk, and what's more, Militech took a keen interest in the whole thing. It's our turn to make heads or tails of this. Head to the station, breach the servers, and download any CCTV-related files. I'll have my code monkeys try to recover the deleted footage. Oh, and by the way, at the time Zoli was working on a piece about Brad Norwood, a Militech fanboy in the Night City Council. Anyway, looks like that piece is never getting published. PPS, transferring you Militech authorization, that'll get you into the station. It says that gets me into the station, but I think they still freak out when I cross the... Yeah. Sorry, I have a plot to deal with. I mean, that's good for me if they're going over here. Might not be a bad idea for me to... Okay, somebody's turned around and seen me. There's a side of me that says that the right call is just to short circuit system collapse. So that means I gotta move quick on these guys. Oh, I blew it. Alright, not the most elegant approach, but did the trick. I keep almost selling Her Majesty, and I feel bad about it. Excuse me. So I don't want to do this every time that I'm at one of these sales slots, but I'd really like to try and keep where I can, like, because we already did the big clean, I'd like to try and maintain as much as I can. Okay. A non-lethal katana. That's exciting. Let's see what that looks like. All right, now the tricky part with the knife... Yeah, so there's the knives... Okay, so they do actually have different names. It's 3 different punk knives. This one goes because it only has the one slot. I don't think these have any weight. Oh, no, they do have weight. Okay. This is a tough one. I think if I break them down for their components, they give me the pattern. And I'm slightly tempted to sell the booze, but I'm actually going to save that for another time. I tend to find that's pretty good for pushing me over the edge on a thing I want to buy. Okay, so let's see if I can keep the... if I can keep the attention off me for the rest of the session. So I think I can just hop past these two if memory serves. Yeah, so I'm thinking just dodge the workers and then we might have a better chance.
Hey, June, it's about you.
I'm really tempted to just go into the back here. So I'm slightly concerned I don't have the full picture on who's back here, but... Okay, so there isn't an E9 on its own, but if I try the 3 BDs, there is no 3 BDs either. So, if I tried BD 55 1C, See what I'm looking, if I'm going to do the BD55 1C, I want that to take me to an E9. But I don't think any of the 1Cs result in me. Yeah, so the only column with a BD that starts me off at 55 is the far right. So I have two 55s there. So the only column with 1Cs, oh sorry, there's two columns with 1Cs, so here and here. So that's all well and good, right? 255, 1C for the sake of example. So the next thing I need to do is vertical. So then the question is, among these two, are there any E9s? No, the E9s are all here. So I think I'm just going to have to bite the bullet and say E9 55. Oh, man. Even the BDs are hard to get. Okay. How you doing, Lord Gloom? Okay, so 55, then we do E9. Then we do 55, but then we need a BD in that column, which we don't have. Are you doing Monster Hunter on your stream? Which, of course, is my not so elegant way of pointing out to everybody that Lord Gloom is a streamer. I'm actually getting over feeling quite sick, Lord Gloom. And I don't. Oh, wonderful. Might do it again this Sunday. I've never really played the series, so I don't have any like strong views on like what to expect from the game. Obviously, it feels like everybody's played it. So, oh yeah, here we go. Okay, so 9, 55, BD. But I didn't think about the follow-up. We've only got 3 slots, so unless I can find a BD or a 55, this is over. How so? Souls. Yeah, like I've seen it played before. There's kind of a, I don't know if this is like a joke among sort of just developer types, because obviously I follow where I can. I try to follow people who I think are interesting and make games on online. But they sort of have this they have this joke about like Monster Hunter is like look at this giant, majestic, beautiful creature. Now kill it and turn it into a hat. I know, so I'm trying to remember the name of the game. It was, actually, I kind of want to look this up. It frustrates me because I played this with Miss Ariella, who I don't know. Dauntless. So I tried Dauntless for a little bit, and like, I don't know, I always like being able to support a Canadian-based developer. I think they're based in Vancouver, actually. But the big challenge that I found with Dauntless, so I think what they wanted to do was they wanted to promote a little bit more elegance in the combat. So like someone like me who's totally new to the genre is going to grab a controller or grab a mouse and keyboard in my case. And, there's the monster and you've got your hammer or you've got your axe or you've got, whatever weapon you have, usually something that is several times larger than your character. And you're just going to like wave away at it, right? You're going to like, I'm going to go up and I'm going to hit the attack button and I'm going to mash that as many times as I can, because that's going to chain together a whole lot of attacks and do the thing. And of course, I'm sure for game developers, this is a really frustrating quality because if you have sort of a player base who are connoisseurs, they're going to get really, really bored of a game that rewards you for walking up to an enemy and like just hammering the attack button all the time. But I don't know if it was the response times. I don't know if it was my response time. But this translated to me for the game feeling quite slow. So I just generally found that I felt that I was communicating a reaction to the game. And again, I think what was happening was I was overcommitting myself to actions in the game in a way that I wasn't familiar with. But that's kind of been my only real exposure to the Monster Hunter genre. There was also, I think, an EA one called Wild Hearts, which I wanted to try, but I actually let my EA Play Pro subscription lapse. It's fun. I had it for years. It's just I'm facing the rather unfortunate prospect because, like, again, I'm the big EA defender, but not like I don't ever want that to be like that's a fun bit just because everybody really hates EA, right? But I never want that to be just a thoughtless reaction. So my tendency to do the EA bit was because I felt that people were inconsistent in their criticism of that particular publisher compared to other ones. So like you'll have people complaining about EA's DLC practices who never play FIFA, and obviously have not played the last two Battlefield games because the only DLC in those are basically cosmetics. There may be some, progression that's unlocked now. It's been a while since I've played 2047, but it's fair to say like the whole idea of DLC or like EA just jamming a bunch of DLC down an audience throat, insofar as that was ever true, is clearly not true for some of their biggest releases right now. Like I think even the Mass Effect remaster just packaged all the DLC in one go. Like the remaster included everything from the game. So anyways, but the unfortunate reality is that while I think they deserve a lot of credit for trying to do new things, the sorts of stuff that would make me an EA Pro subscriber just really hasn't been there. So they used to have a really good third-party library, and slowly over time, those games have been falling out of it. So for the longest time, I thought I had progress in the Sinking City. And all that progress was lost because, for one reason or another, Origin, which was originally the only place you could get the developers' version of the game, they removed it from the store, presumably because the rights went back to the developer after that legal case and that they were selling it on Steam. But like obviously that's not great to feel like you have access to a game, to not be warned about it going away, and then sort of like, oh, okay, so I had made some pretty decent progress in the game, which is now gone. Like I was actually, I'm sorry to sort of dangle this in front of people because I have no idea if I'll ever get back to it or not, but like I was actually doing a YouTube series on the Sinking City where I was also reading H.P. Lovecraft stories that I like the intention was to sort of alternate between that. If I ran into something in the game that I knew was an H.P. Lovecraft story, I would read that story and then I'd go and play some more of the game. And the problem is right now that's just a half-done series and I don't have a way of getting back to where I was before because I don't think any of those saves were persistent on my machine. So I'll take a look. Like I did keep the old videos for it, but again, it's a little bit of a bummer, and like that's obviously quite a few hours of work that I put into a series that I can't realize now. So like that sort of thing doesn't feel great, but I did actually on the feedback, I did sort of point out that the big selling feature for me of EA Play Pro was that even when they didn't have a big premium release that was, interesting enough for me to want to maintain the subscription, the third-party library was usually interesting enough for me to justify continuing on. So the 2 Point games would be a good example of that. So like 2 Point Hospital was an option on EA Play Pro. And I don't know if it's excuse me, still part of the EA Play Pro, but I noticed that more and more of the third-party games actually started going away. I'm assuming that just the contracts were up with those and they didn't bother to renew them. But the big problem with it is that while I really admired EA for taking some swings at new ideas, so like Immortals of Avium through their EA Originals program, and Wild Hearts would be another example of that, which is sort of their take on Monster Hunter. It's really hard to sort of identify the real breakout hit of the latest iteration of EA Originals. And I hate to say that because I actually really like it when I see big companies take those daring bets, because the original version of EA Originals, and it may still be the case, was that all that EA would get back was the marketing costs. So like Sea of Solitude, so far as I can tell, EA didn't make any money off of that. A Way Out, I believe all of the revenue for that went to Hazelight. I don't know about It Takes Two. I suspect probably there were different terms for It Takes Two, just because I do know that it was mentioned in the EA earnings call. And then I can't remember the new one. I think it's called Split Fiction. Anyways, there's a new one that just came out. I actually haven't played It Takes Two yet. Like, that's a really good example of something that's succeeded out of the EA Originals program. And, like Fee and Lost in Random aren't bad either, but they don't seem to have sort of turned into these like what I think that program's trying to do is I think it's trying to find the next Respawn, right? Because a similar style program produced the original Titanfall, and then eventually, EA acquired Respawn and made Titanfall 2 and Apex Legends. Or I think they did Titanfall 2, then acquired it, Respawn, and then did Apex Legends. But yeah, in any case, right? I think that program is that publisher's effort to try and cultivate its next generation of hits, so that it's effectively not reheating, decades-old franchises to maintain relevant. Or, the other challenge that, they're not relying on deals with Disney for things like the Avengers and Star Wars to maintain their position. Because, like, in the end, you're almost just renting revenue from Disney at that point. Again, I feel like I've been touching a bunch of Monster Hunter adjacent sort of stuff, but I've never really engaged with it enough to be able to say, I think I just have more of a general idea of what they're like without any real appreciation of the depth that people clearly like out of it. But sorry, Lord Gloom wrote, it's kind of funny in this one, a new thing that they do. You have a handler who authorizes all your murders. It's like you are literally just the weapon being wielded by a corporate bureaucracy. Yeah. So if it was poachers, you would clear... Sorry, I completely forgot to read the item here. If it was poachers, you would obviously be like some of the worst people in the world. But because, we don't have... It's not an anti-hero story. You're just... You're fulfilling a market need. All right, resuming operations. Hey, we're reopening Memorial Park. Our teams have cleaned up what was left of that journalist. Looks like the train dragged her pretty far. You can start letting people in again. And I'm sorry, I know I'm chattier than usual, and that's obviously saying something, but I'm still not fully over being sick. Ooh, that could have turned bad. Ordered precinct this week, 20-pound Metapang Sin Coffee, 5 packs Biodyne implant cleaner, 1 wide format screen adapted to receive signals from Kiroshi A910X, 5 Kiroshi A910X cameras. Open invitation to tender from Night City Council sent to 21,893 addresses. Invitation to tender, construction completion of the Pacifica N-Cart station. Actually, sorry, there was one other thing I was going to ask you, Lord Gloom. Because you like Dauntless, what would you say if someone like myself were to try and get back into Dauntless? What would you suggest as someone, like if you were setting someone up either to try it again or to try it for the first time, sort of knowing that their tendencies are more to button mashing? What would you recommend in terms of a better way to approach the game to get the most out of it? Night City Council is announcing an open invitation to tender for the completion of the construction of N-Cart Station C11, aka Pacifica. The tender shall be two-tiered, with the assessment criteria proportionally composed of the following: cost of the subject of the contract, preliminary project evaluation, architectural design 1%, preliminary project evaluation technology to be used 4%. The deadline to complete the project is 240 days from the date of the signed contract. Deadline for submission of tenders shall be on 7/18/2078 at 11 p.m. PST. Congratulations. Greetings, user. Due to your continued use of Kinoshi services, you were entered in a raffle to have, and have been selected for one prize. Kinoshi Thermosense 89873. Reply to this email in the next 10 minutes to claim your prize. Hurry now, or another lucky user will be seeing the world in thermovision instead of you, the Kinoshi team. Yeah, okay, that's fair enough. And you know, the other thing too is I'm willing to accept to a certain extent that so the button mashing thing is not necessarily what's the optimal tool for button mashers, but rather realizing that this is probably not the way that the game was intended to be played. What's a way to sort of get over myself and get more out of it? So I'm thinking BD1C7A here. Oh, that doesn't work though, because I would want I want to well, okay, so BD1C7A, then that would be, that doesn't get me a 1C, so that's a non-starter. So if I start with a 1C here, unfortunately that doesn't have a BD for me to work with. So if I do 1C, 1C, BD, BD, okay, yeah. Got the data, no time to lose. Delta the fuck out of there. Excuse me. So there might be a better way out of here that doesn't involve encounters with the
Filthy scum! No more! Please stop! Keep it up! Louder! I'm sorry! No!
Okay, he doesn't seem like he's gonna go, so
I didn't see or hear nothing, I swear.
Why was he beating on you?
'Cause he's a fucking psycho like all the rest of them. Thank Christ you came. Taught him a lesson.
And what did you get canned for?
Nothing. I was set up.
How many more in here?
2, 3?
Think carefully.
I don't know. They all look the fucking same. There's one downstairs, I know that.
Good. Cell's open. Do what you want.
Okay.
It's really aggressive for. I mean, I guess you're an anti-hero. You're not exactly helping this guy out of the goodness of your heart, but like he sounds really, really aggressive.
I've been through enough, Jen.
But yeah. Anyway, sorry. I'm really all over the map here. I may take a small break after this mission just to try and one, refill my tea, but number two, just try and get my head straight a bit. You know what? I'm not even going to think about it. So 55 E9. Yeah, this was not the way to do it. But yeah, the question, purpose of a question like that for me sometimes is less about like how do I make the game sort of conform to my playstyle, but more where do I get the the enjoy. You know what? Actually, it's the worst analogy here, but I actually think it's a little bit like drinking. So for a long time, this is just partly because I grew up in a Salvation Army family. So those of you not familiar with that organization, they do a lot of work with sort of recovering alcoholics. Well, nuts. But yeah, so like obviously growing up in an environment like that, it's I'm gonna there's gonna be a little bit more like clearly parents are gonna stop you from doing underage drinking, right? But as a whole, that was an environment in particular where like there was a unique kind of prohibition against that sort of stuff. So I finally had my first drink like a long time after I'd sort of moved out of the house. And that's not even whether or not I'm sort of still inside the organization. It's one of these things that wasn't part of my life, and there wasn't really the like when you grow up in an environment like that, you always have sort of the when you're like a kid, there'll always be sort of those like whatever modern version of like mystery plays, right, that are intended to teach good moral instruction. And so like there's always that situation where you'll be at the party and your best friend turns out to like be some like borderline demon, which doesn't just like encourage you to drink, but like offers you every single illegal substance in the world and like gives you a super important like you won't be my friend anymore if you don't take all of the drugs right now kind of moral choice. And of course there's usually these stories show the good decision not to do it, and that the consequences aren't all that bad. And like this never happens. Like obviously these are trying to communicate real situations that happen for people, which is people tend to feel pressured to do things that they maybe on their own wouldn't. And like a really good example of this would actually be in George Orwell's unpublished preface to Animal Farm. It's less to do with the kinds of things that people are openly suppressing or discouraging, but rather it's more about what sort of falls under, well, that just isn't done, or this is how do I put it? Like, they were legally allowed to do this, but that was just in bad taste, right? Like, self-censorship is essentially what I'm describing here. But, and yeah, I tend to find, at least in my own experience, peer pressure tends to take that form of, I'm sure there'll be someone who just likes bullying. So inevitably, if somebody wants to call you a square, straight edge, or whatever, they're going to do that. But they're going to find another reason to, to tease you anyway. But instead, the I think the big defeat of those kinds of stories is that you are never given, it seems like they're equipping their audience for these points of great moral clarity, where the choice is, do you listen to the good lessons that your parents gave you? Sotto voce, they obviously were never given this kind of temptation, and when they absolutely didn't fall into it. Your parents have never had a drink or had premarital sex, or whatever thing they're trying to put in. But yeah, the defeating part of that is that it creates a situation of great moral clarity that usually doesn't exist in the real world. That very often the peer pressure you feel is never because your best friend tells you to do this thing. It's rather everyone in an area is doing a certain thing, and so you don't even necessarily think about whether it's right or wrong. I think this explains a lot of internet pylons, right? If it's the main character on Twitter, you don't even think about whether or not there's a charitable version of what they said. You just, make fun of them because you have social license to be mean to someone for a day. Which is one of the reasons why, I do have a vicious streak in me that really wants to participate in that sort of stuff. But I kind of realize, I actually gave this analogy at work today for something else, but it's like taking heroin, right? I'm sure it feels super good the first time that you do it, but once you do that, it's very hard to imagine that once you are a heroin user, that it's just going to stick at that one use. And probably the barriers to subsequent use are going to be lower, especially once you've sort of done that particular one. So anyways, that was a really wild and winding story. But where I wanted to get out of this was, because it was so long until I actually finally drank alcohol for the first time. It's the same reaction that everybody has. It's oh God, what is this stuff? Why does anybody drink this? And to this day, as a proper adult who's out of school, I have kind of something resembling a social circle, but not I'm not somebody who goes out to a club every weekend, as you might imagine by me streaming on Twitch at 10:30 in the evening. And I still sort of feel even though I'm probably around the age where going home and having a single malt at the end of a hard day is maybe a good way to take the edge off or whatever, I'm still utterly convinced that everyone just drinks to try and capture the enjoyment that the adults, seem to be getting out of it when they were too young to drink. I think it's just a big I don't know, hedonistic Ponzi scheme. All right, Net Shamans. Pacifica has everything that you would expect of a place with such an infamous reputation. Shady locals, sketchy shops, and the presence of the enigmatic voodoo boys. Enigmatic how, you ask? After all, it is not uncommon for close-knit gangs to harbor secrets about where the rest of the city is completely unaware, and the voodoo boys are no different from any of those groups, right? Now ask yourself this. Have you ever witnessed a gang shootout? Probably more times than you can count on two hands. And who was there? The Valentinos, Tiger Claws, Maelstrom, 6th Street, but never the Voodoo Boys, never them. Depending on who you ask, you will hear different stories and opinions about this reclusive gang. They are the de facto leaders of Night City's Haitian diaspora. They slaughter black roosters in blood sacrifice, God only knows where they get them. They commune with their ancestors through prayer. They summon ghosts and allow them to assume control of their bodies. They bring pain, disease, and suffering to their enemy's doorstep with the help of occult voodoo dolls. Perhaps you think some or even all of these claims are just hollow rumors, but can you be so sure? Some say that they have witnessed voodoo boy netrunners in the deep net. Surrounded by vampires and leviathans, they traverse these strange depths of cyberspace, both more beautiful and more dangerous than we could ever imagine in real space. Their objectives there known only to themselves. So who are they? What are they searching for? What is their plan? In the end, perhaps we shouldn't ask ourselves these questions. Indeed, some secrets are better left undiscovered. Okay, 2 7As. This one gets me to the 55, and if that gets me to a BD, which it doesn't, that doesn't get me to a second 7A. This would be 7A, 7A, 55 BD. You know what? I think I'm just going to go for this and see where the rest takes me. So 1C FF would be best. Yeah. There's a couple of details in terms of the way that the, again, it's like news articles or data shards like that one there. There's a couple of details that I always think are kind of neat in the way they reveal something about the world.
Fuck me. I mean, woo! Had me on the edge of my fucking seat. Luckily, it's all over. You handled it like a true profesh. I got the data, and you're in the clear. Closing the gig.
I'll loot this and then finish the thought. Okay. Well, shucks. I don't think I have an E955. Nope. So I think this part here was to actually direct my attention to the fact that I had a sneaky way in. Obviously, that didn't work. Welcome to the big leagues, V. You're one of my best mercs, which means you'll get the best gigs from my most trusted clients. Thanks for all your hard work till now. Yeah, so there's a couple of things that are revealed through the emails and sort of side stories like this. So one of the things I always thought was kind of interesting about the Kenoshi spam is obviously the game excuse me. The game has fun with taking sort of like modern day spam and turning that into a turning that into some like knowing wink to the audience. But I think the really interesting part about some of those sorry, just deciding which of these two. Well, this one has fewer slots, so I think some of the really interesting examples of these ones are where there are just little subtle changes which actually reveal differences in the way that this world works. So, for instance, I don't know how many of you get that. Maybe this is just like, maybe I'm actually revealing my browsing preferences by saying this, but like on at least one of my accounts, I won't say which one, because I'm curious if this is just a general tendency, or if this is affecting a specific mail provider. But like, it's some equivalent of like, hey pervert, I see the kind of porn that you look at, and I have like, I had something installed on your video or whatever on your laptop. So like, there's already a couple of things that have tipped me off that this is not in fact a serious hacker who has compromised my computer. But it's like, wire me this amount, or I'll this is easy. Or I'll like leak it to your wife and all your friends. And like, this is very obviously not intended to catch everyone. Like I think this is one of the big problems with scams for people that eventually causes them to be taken in by that, which is I think you can probably see like 20 or 25 of those. You can see 20, 25 of those a day. And, or, just over time, you get this library of scams like this. And you start giving yourself the impression that, I'm too smart for this stuff. I'm not going to be taken in by that. And yet these are the people who are taken in by the kinds of influencers that wind up fleecing them in some sort of like NFT or crypto scam. Or there's just a different kind of email. And the thing is that it just winds up fitting their particular demographic in the way that the other ones don't. So like these things are intended to have sort of low take-up rates, but they wind up getting enough people that they're worth whatever expense it takes to send out that spam. And like the thing that's interesting about that one is because it does, usually what it wants is some kind of Bitcoin. That while it's on the blockchain, you can actually look and see what transactions have been put on that. And sure enough, like there are definitely people putting money on that thing. Now, this could also be a situation where, maybe this is someone trying, like, I don't genuinely know who the person behind this is. So it's possible that the only money that's been transferred in and out of that wallet is actually specifically designed to make it look like this is something because other people have paid, right? It's kind of the old trick, of like having some money inside of the begging cup before you you put it out. But I don't know, assuming it's just kind of one of these revealed preferences things, right? Like the fact that I continue to see them suggests to me that there is a like there's a success rate behind it. The same way that, for a while, and maybe this is only a Canada thing, but one thing that had come up was that there were a series of sort of threatening legal letters, and I think they had some like quasi connection to the actual intellectual property owners. But I think what the idea was that they exploited some sort of relationship between the ISPs and like IP claims. And effectively what happened was they would, through the ISP, transmit a, we know you've been, illegally benefiting from this product, and you're, in order to, ensure compliance or whatever, you need to pay this amount. And if you ignored it, it would go away. And if you pay, and the thing that's difficult about this, right, is that this is being forwarded to you from your ISP. So this actually overcomes the illegitimacy of the what most of the spam looks like. But the really insidious part about this one was that by paying the original amount, this apparently would result in multiple other letters asking for increasing amounts. And they would leverage the fact that because you paid in the original case, that this was effectively an admission of guilt. So now again, I was never, because I only like know about these things through articles, right? So I was never quite sure what the legality and what the relationship with the actual IP holder is, because I think there are some real challenges with some of the, like the BitTorrent stuff in particular, But even like just the question in terms of like, how do you know the person you sent the message to is the one who is using it on the computer? I mean, I know like you hear this all the time from people like, oh yeah, my friend must have downloaded that or whatever. But like clearly the activity that happens through your network is not necessarily what's happening. Like that's not necessarily going to be the same person who opens the email, right? So if I, if I have, I mean, God, I can't tell you. I'm going to make a guess here that based on the number of base stations in my apartment building that have the default ISP name, I'm going to make a guess here that there is a fairly substantial number of them that have, that have default passwords too. At the very least, I'm going to guess that the admin password is probably the same default one. So, what do you do in that situation, right? Well, if I had an intention of downloading something that I didn't have the rights to, which of course, this is Twitch. I am not advocating this as a method. I am, of course, describing scams and the different methods through that happen. But like, that's a perfectly credible version of events as to why that particular set of activity is going to be on that account's logs. But how, someone completely, someone just completely taken out, out of, I'm taken by surprise by this sort of thing. Like maybe they just want to say, oh God, I better pay this thing and make it go away. Right. I'm maybe not that generous with my money, but like I can definitely see a situation where that comes up. And again, the legal basis for doing so is dubious at best, or even just say like someone straight up pirated it, that group doesn't know. They don't have cameras inside the house. So yeah, the fact that they sort of did that admission, quote unquote, admission of guilt just wound up being, it also demonstrated a willingness to pay. So at that point, you start getting increasingly aggressive messages. So I have to believe that there was something that changed in either the enforcement of that rule or a crackdown on who could level those kinds of charges or claim to level those charges, just because I don't hear as many stories of them. But when I was giving this example here of like the hey pervert example, I'd be willing to guess, like almost certainly, that you would see a much higher proportion of pornographic material receiving those letters than you would say like downloading a copy of Half-Life. Because, like, of course you're going to have someone who's like, yeah, this is something that people are embarrassed by and they want to like just get it out of the way. As opposed to, oh, video game? Like, yeah, screw you. Everybody knows I play video games. Which is funny because I'm just I'm going to assume generally today, at least, from a casual read of, how people talk online. Like my Twitter feed is almost constantly OnlyFans stuff now. I don't know if other people get that. Like that might just be an indicator of the, the algorithm that I've wound up in, which is even more interesting to me. But like, it's a little bit like the Cyberpunk setting now, right? It's very, there's not a whole lot of subtlety in most of the advertising you see in certain corners of the internet at this point. But it does still seem to be credible enough that people are taken in with this, like, I'm going to expose you for the type of porn you look at. But where I wanted to go with this story was the thing that's neat about the Kenoshi one is that usually what you will see is, actually, you know what? I wonder if I could find the text for something like this. Just let me take a quick second here. So apparently there is a Reddit thread called the Hey Pervert Scam. Okay, actually, I really like this top comment. Sorry, this is going to get a bit crude for a bit, but this is from John Mongi in the R Fishing. The Hey Pervert scam. Most of you have noticed that nearly, if not all of the posts on this server were about the same scam, so I want to make it easier for everyone to understand how this scam works. Trust me, it's way more simple than it looks. What is the Hey Pervert scam? It involves you receiving an email. Oh, it doesn't actually say the text of it. Let me just take a minute here and see if I can see. Okay, here we go. Hello, pervert. I've sent this message from your Microsoft account. So this is almost certainly somebody who's like spoofed the address. I want to inform you about a very bad situation for you. However, you can benefit from it if you act wisely. Have you heard of Pegasus? This is a spyware program that installs on computers and smartphones and allows hackers to monitor the activity of device owners. It provides access to your webcam, messengers, emails, call records, etc. It works well on Android, iOS, macOS, and Windows. I guess you already figured out where I'm getting at. It's been a few months since I installed it on all your devices because you're not quite choosy about what links you click on the internet. During this period, I've learned about all aspects of your private life, but one is of special significance to me. I've recorded many videos of you jerking off to highly controversial porn videos. Given the questionable genre is almost always the same, I conclude that you have a sick perversion. I doubt that you want your friends, family, and coworkers to know about it. However, I can do it in a few clicks. Yeah, this is slightly different than one that I saw, but you can. Hello, Isley. Yeah, so first you get Doom Eternal, and then now you get the Hey Pervert scam. Yeah, this sucks because like there's the part that I wanted to get to was the payout part, and like I totally understand why people are. I totally understand why people want to like hold out the payment address on it. Oh, there's one here. Okay. I doubt you want your friends, family, and coworkers to know about it. However, I can do it in a few clicks. Every number on your contact list will suddenly receive these videos on WhatsApp, on Telegram, on Instagram, on Facebook, on email, everywhere. It's going to be a tsunami that will sweep away everything in its path, and first of all, your former life. Don't think of yourself as an innocent victim. No one knows where your perversion might lead in the future, so consider this a kind of deserved punishment to stop you. I'm some kind of God who sees everything. However, don't panic. As we know, God is merciful and forgiving, as do I. But my mercy is not free. So this one again is different. So this one says transfer $1,200 to my Litecoin wallet, and then there's an example of a Litecoin wallet. Once I receive confirmation of the transaction, I will permanently delete all videos compromising you, uninstall Pegasus from all your devices, and disappear from your life. You can be sure my benefit is only money. Otherwise, I wouldn't be writing to you, but destroy your life without a word in a second. I'll be notified when you open my email, and from that moment you have exactly 48 hours to send the money. If cryptocurrencies are the uncharted waters for you, don't worry, it's very simple. Just Google crypto exchange or buy Litecoin, and then it will be no harder than buying some useless stuff on Amazon. So I'm actually going to see if I can find one of these blockchain all right, that's annoying that I can't copy and paste, but okay, so either I didn't write that in correctly or Okay. I'm going to try one more time. Because as amusing as I find this, like, all of this was purposely to... Oh, boy. You know, when I do this stuff on my Mac, it just detects the text automatically, and I refuse to believe Microsoft has invested this much in AI and is not equipped itself to be able to do this. I'm going to try one more thing. All right. Sorry, it's a huge song and dance for a really pointless thing, but... Okay, apparently that is just a hard address to find. One last... I'm going to do one last check and then just give up. Okay, this is honestly not worth the amount of time that I'm putting inside of it. So you guys, hi, this is the Bank of Switzerland. Go to this link to receive billions in Rwandan currency. Yeah, so there's a few different variations on this for sure. But the point that I wanted to make out of this one was just note the specific time frame that's referred to in here, right? I'll be notified when you open my email, and from that moment you have exactly 48 hours to send the money. If cryptocurrencies are uncharted water for you, etc., etc. But that's never the time that... that is never the time that that the Cyberpunk scams have. They're always like, respond in 10 minutes or we'll give it to someone else. And like, there are versions of that scam today, right? Those are the ones that are, you go to a website, but of course that's because when you're on a website, you're going to have a much smaller period of time before you're going to like forget it, right? Like, so very rarely do you have like a 1 in a million opportunity presented to you on a website and you're thinking 2 days later, oh man, what if I'd clicked on that? Maybe I really would have found hot singles in my area. Like, you know, no, it's usually just going to be like, okay, I'm either going to do this thing or I'm not. And it's the time pressure that makes people sort of freak out and do silly things. But in the case of Cyberpunk, the fact that it's an email, but it's an email that has a 10-minute scam kind of gives you an idea in terms of just the speed and the pace of this world. And that's either related to, you know, an expectation of what people's attention is going to be. It could be an expectation in terms of kind of the throughput of these sorts of scams. There's a few different things, but I think it's really interesting that, you know, they're specifically designed to mimic scams that we see in the real world, but and like have the common lines that we usually see in some of these, but that specifically there are certain features that make it Cyberpunk 2077, and in this particular case it was the timeline of 10 minutes in an email, whereas normally we'd see 48 hours. Order 40412, elimination. We have Edith Katag in custody, awaiting further orders. Do you confirm that she was wearing a listening device? Confirmed. Understood. Eliminate Edith Kataga for terrorist activity motivated by anti-corporate and anti-capitalist ideologies. Copy that. There was a second example that I wanted to take out of this, but I went down the rabbit hole of the Hey Pervert scam. And actually, one of the reasons why I spent so much time on that, and I didn't read it, like I said, it's going to get rude for a little bit, but what I did enjoy the most was the phishing. Okay, actually, what I'll do, credit where credit's due, I'll do John Monge's summary, and then the first reply did give me a chuckle. So most of you have noticed that nearly, if not all of the posts on the server are about the same scam, so I want to make it easier for everyone to understand how this scam works. Trust me, it's way more simple than it looks. What is the Hey Pervert scam? It involves you receiving an email telling you that they have videos or pictures of you pleasing yourself, and that they will release them and send them to your family if you don't pay an amount, usually between $1,000 and $2,000 US to a Bitcoin wallet. They sometimes use advanced techniques to make the scam seem more realistic, like spoofing the from field and, on the email to make it look like they hacked you, or sending you one of your passwords, even your address. They usually also give a 2-day deadline to submit the payment. It usually works because 90% of men engage in self-pleasing activities. How do they get this data? They can get it from multiple sources, but the most common one is you creating accounts on sketchy websites, such as those PH game ads, for example, and they use the data you put there. They can also get them from email data leaks, etc. You should not be worried about this. Is it real? No, they do not have a video of you pleasing yourself, and they cannot send it to your family or leak it online. You do not have to send them any money to the Bitcoin address. What do I do now? You should ignore them or block them and forget about it. It's important that you update your passwords for extra security, especially the ones linked to compromised email addresses. But this is optional and just to be safe. Please do not sign up or give any kind of information to websites you don't trust. You'll probably receive the exact same email or similar one even when the deadline is over. Just ignore them. That's pretty much it. Now, just stay safe and be careful out there. To which Green Cartoonist offers the insightful reply, what if I reply with a video of me jerking it and maintaining eye contact with the camera? Which I think is the only appropriate response to that kind of scam, but I don't recommend that. But yeah, so that was really, I just wanted to talk about the timeline on that. The other detail that I thought was kind of interesting in the setting was the way that they describe the web. That the web in this game, so despite the fact that it's a futuristic setting, despite the fact that it's the it's obviously a setting that predates the internet, but it was so the genre overall is credited with sort of forecasting the internet, right? Cyberspace in Neuromancer. And it's definitely like one where if you're making a Cyberpunk game today, you kind of need to just acknowledge that the internet is the internet is going to be known by its audience, or by the audience, and that the idea of somehow the internet being like a novel thing is just not going to fly. Okay, it should be. Oh, don't mind me.
On my way to investigate.
Oh, yeah, got enough for a system collapse. Just as long as I don't run over him on the way out. So I'm going to take a small break just to refill my tea and such. I don't have that much more time left, but I figured I did want to get my head straight on these things. But yeah, the thing that's kind of interesting about this, right, is you've got a genre that predates the internet, but definitely anticipates it. And I do think there's actually a useful distinction to be drawn between the William Gibson internet, cyberspace, where you have how do I put it? Like, you have this like literal world of ideas, and the free thinkers, the hackers, are the people who really run cyberspace, really have mastery of it. And like, obviously this is the sort of thing that someone, I mean, Gibson sort of sees himself following in the footsteps of William S. Burroughs. He doesn't necessarily see himself as sort of like, it's really fun to sort of imagine. I think probably nowadays there's a lot of people designing games and thinking like, how do I make this a franchise? And I'm pretty sure that someone like William Gibson sitting down to write Neuromancer was probably not sitting down like, how do I launch a sci-fi subgenre? I think he talked about the inspiration for Cyberspace being someone playing an arcade game with a Sony Walkman on, and like just getting this really distinct impression that if this kid could, like, he would jump into the arcade machine and like live inside it. But yeah, there's something kind of neat where you read some of the foundational stuff for Cyberpunk, and you definitely have this, freedom of thought, almost like this borderline hippie kind of thing, right? The sort of stuff that you would expect in terms of major figures, in terms of cryptography, and people who are founding, some of the earliest Silicon Valley companies, who are technically capable, but also have these very, I want to say, far out ideology, in the sense that, it's the sort of thing that actually is quite different from what we normally associate with the megacorp now. Like the megacorp today, people would think of that as an Apple or an Amazon. Now, I definitely don't think Amazon would count as being like that early phase Silicon Valley company. I mean, Bezos was at D. Shaw, a quantitative hedge fund before Amazon. But like there's definitely a bunch of sort of late hippie stuff that eventually finds its way into Silicon Valley and sort of brings about this big technological revolution. So I think you can kind of see these two cross currents running in some of these foundational cyberpunk stories, even if they're not necessarily living in the same area, right? Like, the general impression I get of William Gibson is that he actually isn't a big tech guy. Like, he's not Steve Wozniak. So much as it's sort of a useful thing for him to write about and speculate about and write stories about. But if you were to do something like that in a cyberpunk story today, it would be ludicrous, right? We're allowed to have cool cyberspace, right? Like, you can have this metaverse or this virtual reality thing, or you can have even this sort of like retro looking thing. Like, so the Matrix, right? There is the world of the Matrix as realized by the people who are in it, and that just looks like the real world with cool special effects. And then there's the Matrix as realized by computer monitors, which is very arcane, right? It looks a little bit like the left-hand side of the screen here. And like definitely when you're doing cyberpunk stuff, like that degree of exposure of the tech, especially because that's kind of a hacker thing, right? That you don't necessarily care about the aesthetics of the program, you care about the results. The aesthetics are left for your character, your personality. But again, like, it's one of these things where you actually do need to deal with the fact that a modern audience is familiar with the internet. And this can lead to some weird and interesting conflicts depending on how true you want to be to the source material. So in the case of Cyberpunk 2077, there's a couple of neat things that they've done with this. So they've got the, I think it's Bart Moss, who like sort of took down the original internet and sort of unleashed this Maelstrom. Well, Maelstrom has a special meaning inside Cyberpunk, but I think you get the idea, right? the internet as we know it is not really a thing. And there is the black wall, which is designed to protect us, but it's also sort of used as this excuse to constrain some of the, the freedom that we would normally associate with the internet. But also just because there's this much more vast, digital world, it's described in similar ways. And this is the shard that I read about the net shamans. This sort of stuff is spoken about in the kinds of ways you would imagine people talking about the sea in the age of exploration, where you don't really know what's out there. And like sometimes people are going to be telling you, yeah, there's these mythological creatures and some of them might sound incredible, but are you sure every single one of those legends is false? So Cyberpunk's got this really interesting, I don't want to say tension, but they do this interesting play where your character is obviously quite capable in terms of the net. And a lot of your interactions with the net are very conventional, right? You'll see news articles, you'll see different businesses, you'll buy cars, you'll buy apartments, you'll furnish apartments. Really standard stuff that I think, maybe the speed of delivery is different, but for the most part, these are things that are not really the future for us. I think these are things that are basically here to at least some degree. Like I've got some bookshelves finally, not enough for all my books, but I ordered those on IKEA. I had them within 2 days, and I had the joy of like setting it all up, and finding out how dusty some of my book piles were. I was like sneezing for 2 days, but like that's, in the case of Cyberpunk, like that's really a matter of degree, because I'm also assuming that if I live in certain regions of the world that I can possibly expect same day delivery for certain things. And certainly a metropolis like Night City would be the sort of place where you could imagine that kind of instantaneous delivery would be a service you could count on a sufficiently, once you hit a sufficient scale. But despite this familiarity with the internet, there is still the origin. There's still, Cyberpunk, the product that was made before we really knew what the internet was. Or at the very least, didn't see what it would become in the year that Cyberpunk is released, I think would maybe be, if I wanted to be careful in terms of the statement. Because, like, obviously, people's access to the internet came in different stages. But I think they've kind of retained a little bit of the mystery. I mean, so the Bart Moss event is definitely one thing that lets them play with that a little bit. But I also just kind of like the idea about how, again, you sort of have potentially the oppressive outer world. And again, that's the rebels, the hackers, the people who don't follow the rules that are, on top in the virtual world. But they've been able to sort of get some of those mysterious, dangerous elements by both sort of expanding the space, even while putting up something like the Black Wall, and then just giving, with something like the Voodoo Boys, just enough, mystique that's probably cultivated by the group in the first place, to, raise some questions in terms of, does that email that says you'll die in 3 days if you don't forward it to people, like maybe that really is a thing, better forward it just to be sure. And again, to a certain extent, it's almost a matter of degree from the hey pervert email. And yet to a certain extent, there definitely feels to be this much more sort of primal element. Like there's a reason why I made the analogy to the sea and the sorts of things that you would hear from like mariners and people discovering these sort of, previously unknown or under, I don't want to say undiscovered, but like uncharted by at least people that they'd known, parts of the world and things that maybe had seemed incredible coming out. And again, the fact that people are not always reliable in conveying what they had seen. And so you have these somewhat preposterous accounts by our understanding, and yet being mildly sympathetic just due to the fact that you don't you're dealing with people who saw a weird thing for the first time, and maybe they didn't have the best diet and eyesight, and they were worried about other things, so they didn't quite get it down right. Anyways, I've been monologuing. I did want to get the two details about the setting, because I think they're neat things that the game does to establish the setting, and again, in a way that doesn't require a whole lot of it doesn't require, like, this is not the sort of stuff that you see rendered in like an awesome cutscene. You see it presented in text, but it opens up, quite a bit more of the setting in an interesting way. But I'm going to stay on the pause screen for a little bit. We are going to steal another car, but only after I get some tea, and hopefully I get my head straight, and just otherwise, I don't want to become like not chatty, but I do want to come up with a slightly better balance between gameplay and commentary. So, like I said, gonna get a refresh of the tea, stretch, just try and get the cobwebs out, and then we'll be back for about another 45 minutes, an hour of Cyberpunk, I think. See you in a little bit. Okay, I am very sorry about that wait, although I know for some of you this might be an average wait. Um, excuse me. For those of you curious, at least those of you who are still here, when I say that I threw up in stream, I mean that in quite a literal sense. I think today might be cursed. So I needed a minute to try and recompose myself. I think I probably took a chance having some pizza before stream because it was fast to do, but I got to quote-unquote enjoy it again. Probably more information than people wanted, but I'm not...
All good. Let's go. Check the courts.
I'm not deliberately trying to waste everyone's time. I'm just a shambles today, I think, so... We will try and stick the dismount, I guess? Alright, I obviously went the wrong direction. Oh crap.
Something else. Client's got a strict deadline. Seems he's on his way out again. See, he's gonna down the skeleton.
One of the other so I have an interesting, how do I put it? So there's a writers group at work. So you might notice that some of the time that I like to spend on my...
Saw that coming a mile away.
Okay.
Motherfuckers won't let you go easy.
Some of the things that I try to do with my spare time, or, you know, close to it, at least this is sort of a work-driven thing, so I don't need to kind of go really far away from a place that I would already be. But, when I... Oops. Oh boy. I could probably just system crash one of them out, but I'm going to see if I can speed along. But yeah, so there's the things that I kind of take the time for, particularly off stream, right? So I'll take one day out of the month to, or one stream out of the month to go to the local game dev meetup. And I think, you know, even if I'm not necessarily a developer, well, that's not entirely true, right? I think some of you have seen a game that I contributed to. Oh crap! Oh, that's not good. I think I just ruined it.
Hang on, gotta go.
I might be able to get this off the railing, but I don't think I'm going to get it off on time, so... Like a glove. Yeah, there's no way we're hitting that deadline. Oh, that could not be worse. All right. This is a disaster.
Hey guys!
You got the assignment, Lee. I have to dock your payout. Cut off that tail of yours, Lee. I don't care how.
This is like the worst gun to be doing this with, but there we go.
I'll take the hit. In a forgiving mood for once. Thanks for the help, V. My
Yes.
chum will do the finishing touches.
I've not been doing too well on these lately. Alright, sorry, what was I... Oh, yeah, so the time that I take for certain things. So there's the local game dev meetup. Some of you may have seen the the pandemic game that I helped out with. So like it's I don't like I think the challenge is that it's very easy in some cases to sort of claim undue expertise. So what will very often happen is, like, I think everybody just really wants to relive that scene in Annie Hall where there's this, like, media studies professor going on about some Fellini film, and, you know, like, he's being annoying as those people are, and Alan finally says, you know, aren't you ashamed to just pontificate like this out in the open? And it's like in Marshall McLuhan, it's like you don't know anything about Marshall McLuhan. And this guy's like, oh really? Well, I just happen to teach like a media studies or whatever course at Columbia, and I happen to think my insights into Marshall McLuhan's work are very relevant. So Alan's like, oh, well, I happen to have Marshall McLuhan right here. And he takes the actual Marshall McLuhan out and says, it's like, yeah, I heard what you're saying. You know nothing of my work, etc., etc. It's a funny bit. It's always been a funny bit. And of course, in the age of Twitter, it is really easy for people to claim that, like, so you've sometimes got these situations where there's like 26 authors on a study, and someone's making a claim, author of the study here, but it turns out that they are actually, or maybe it's like a book that was edited or something. Maybe the study may not be the right one to say, but like it turns out that the thing that they are opining on is something that they actually did not participate in any way. And like, I don't know if it's just because people aren't expecting people to do the work, or they just don't care because the intended audience is the sort of person who won't do the work. I don't really know why people do this. But what I do tend to find is that I think people are really there's like two competing forces. One is that there are people who are really wanting an excuse to move the goalposts on standards, right? So if someone has done an independent game and it's, a portfolio project, or it's their very first, like, somebody who likes writing, wants to be a games writer, put together a thing in Twine, and, made it available, maybe even made it available for money on itch or Steam, and it didn't sell a whole lot of copies, but they shipped it. I think it is completely fair for that person to call themselves a game developer. However, I think the status of game developer is going to be determined not by whether or not they have shipped that project. What's going to determine it is whether or not the person taking the role of the judge agrees with their conclusion. So, if somebody wants to say, game developer here, actually, ... nobody's going to take this... nobody's actually going to take this at face value. And in some cases, that's appropriate. So, for instance, if somebody's going to claim, some property of 3D models, or the complexity of creating like a certain type of character, or by the way, just to be clear, the thing that caused me to revisit my dinner was not a pizza that I picked up off of the sidewalk.
Got a gig. Some biotechnica big shot. She's holed up in a corpo hotel. Security's tight, and I need me a merc who's up to the task. Anyway, you like a challenge. Deets attached.
All right, gun for hire. Eliminate Joanne Koch. Biotechnica Corporate Hotel on Republic Way. Details. Chick's name is Joanne Koch, Regional Director for Tech and Development or some shit at Biotechnica. Means she tests all kinds of shiny new gizmo. Last little gizmo she tested, yeah, that one flatlined over 70 souls. Folks from a clan called Red Orchard or Red Ochre or something like that. Koch tried to dry the tears of the victims' families with a few ennies. Ever try that? Doesn't work. And decided to close the book on it. Sure enough, book didn't close all the way. All the families pulled together to hire someone who'd give this director Koch the cordial greeting she deserves. You know the kind. Super cordial. To show her they really care. I'll flick you the cords and an access code to the Corpo Hotel Koch is holed up in. Shoot me a word after the smoke's cleared. These ones I actually always feel a little conflicted about. Because there is just something... It's funny, like... These are unsympathetic characters, but I actually think Murder for Hire is just a different nature. Like, that's a different kind of activity than some of the other tasks that you're given. Sometimes it's a matter of degree, and like sometimes, you know, you're a mercenary, so you sort of understand that there'll be a there'll be like an element of danger involved, but I think there's something specific of like, no, this is a corporate director. They killed some people, and so now you go and kill them. They're always the ones I've actually felt a little uncertain about, and it's either just because I don't think as carefully about the other ones, or I've got a weird sense of morality. But yeah, this one always felt a little weird. I think I know the way that they help you get over over feeling bad. So I believe in this one, if you try and let her, like if you try a non-violent approach, she will just trigger the alarm and sort of force your hand on it. But I don't know, like I'm not entirely sure. I'm not entirely sure that's a really good reason to like kill someone. Alright, so if we do 7A55... Alright, the 55E9 is a challenge, so I could do 7A, 7A, 55, E9, 55. Let's just try that for a start. So I don't have an E9 7A sadly, so what about a 1C 7A 7A? Yes. Okay, anyways, I wanted to talk about satire, but I keep going into the weeds on other things. Okay, so I almost blew it here. Problem with AC. I'd like to report that the AC in my room is broken. It's stuffy in here, and I'm getting a weird smell. Please sort this out as soon as possible, otherwise I'm going to have to lodge a complaint against management. Implants for cheap, cheap, cheap. Huge savings on discounted secondhand cyberware. Don't miss out. Today's detail: plastic synth pink, hand size M, second gen, used 1 week only, near mint condition. Tech hair green, shoulder length, luminescent, second gen, moderate use, occasional flickering, faint cigarette smoke smell. Alloy feet, chrome unpainted, men's size 8, first gen, light rust from lake water exposure, price reduction due to lack of owner records. Synthetic calf muscle, red, no casing, mint condition, second gen, retrofit capable with older joint models. Items go fast, so buy now. Continue following us for the latest and best deals. Alright, so, yeah, in the case of, like, so I think, the question for me, the more relevant question for me on the whole, like, credential thing is the status of game developer relevant to this conversation? And I think in a lot of cases, it's too broad of a distinction to actually be meaningful for the purposes that people are using for it. So being a game developer, in theory, could account for, you know, everyone in the production chain. And if, you know, if the topic you're talking about is, like, large enough that it touches on every part of game development, I'm not entirely sure it's like a well-scoped problem. So I should just be able to scooch on by. Oh yes, there's definitely going to be a big shootout. But, you know, if instead you're sort of talking about the idea of, you know, well, let's take our, you know, first-time game developer as an example. If someone's going to be talking about game narrative and, you know, someone has talked about, you know, something, and then somebody says, okay, well, I'm actually, you know, a writer of games, and, you know, I'm not entirely sure that's right. Here's a couple of other considerations that I think are important here. I think that's completely legitimate to draw from that experience. Now, that doesn't, like, I think in most of these cases, asserting universal truths of writing is probably not the most productive conversation to have. I think there's enough variety in how this stuff works that I think we'll be okay. Yeah. Don't think there's a way to take these out in advance. Yeah, wish it were otherwise. Because if I recall, these are actually a bit of a pain to deal with. Okay, so I'm going to do this the smart way.
He attacked me!
Yeah, like I think the problem here is not that you go to the person who's making a claim based on their own experience and say, well, you're not a real game developer because you just have one experimental project. What you probably do is you actually talk about the substance of what's being said. And very often in the case of writing, you know, that's probably going to be, it's such a broad subject that there's actually room for multiple different accounts, and we're really just talking about two different systems. But again, that's never how it turns out, right? Like, obviously, if you're having, again, discussion of like complexity of 3D models or something along those lines, and someone's experiences in making text-based adventure games, I'm not entirely sure that the game development experience is really relevant to what's being brought to bear here. But to me, I always think it's useful to sort of hear perspectives from people. And, you know, I'd say for the most part, the local community has been really open to some of the weird stuff that I have to share. There have been a couple instances lately where I think people have communicated, like, I think I've noticed a couple of cases where there's like very pointed comments towards things I've been said, but they're never like explicitly, like they don't come out and say this is specific, like this is about System Shock and I'm really mad at that thing that he said. It's usually just like, you know, poking at something that I'd said. And like, that's the worst thing for me, right? Because I just take as an invitation for defense. And so I just say something more shocking the second time around. But I don't know. I think for the most part, the community's been pretty open to it, especially because one of the most encouraging things, there's two really encouraging responses that I'll get from people. One is usually it's, I really hate that you did that talk because now I need to engage with this thing that I don't like. And I was like, those are always the best ones, right? Because you never want to convert people. I don't think it's useful to have like acolytes or people who just think the same way as you. But I do think it's useful if people think about things in a different way. I think those are the most valuable. And then actually another one that really encouraged me, there was a local developer who did this really wonderful game to help them learn Korean. And I didn't remember what the name of it was, but it wasn't even a defense of AI so much as it was an effort to try and cool it a little bit on the rhetoric regarding AI. And it's mostly just from the position that, and this partly affected the Weather Factory community, but I'm noticing lately there's this term getting thrown around a lot, AI slop. And I get what people mean by that, right? And because I saw this, like, once DALI came out, there was no end of people just sharing tons and tons of images that they made in it. And I understand why that was a thing. It was like when you make this sort of stuff, or prompt it, or however you want to call it, um, it's amazing, right? Like, you don't expect computers to do that sort of stuff, and you gave it an instruction and it made that thing, and you're excited and you want to share it with people. The difficulty is, of course, is that the excitement that you feel of having written the prompt and seen this thing come out is not necessarily the experience that the audience feels looking at the image. It's just all of a sudden people are looking at their timelines and they're seeing this just barrage of like obviously different but very similar in sort of category kinds of images. And like, for me, it drove me crazy. Like, I just really wanted to see something else. But like, I don't really think I tend to get cranky about a lot of things, but I don't ever think I like kind of went out and like really said, stop doing that. And I've noticed actually most of that stuff just isn't in my timeline anymore. Like, people kind of got it out of their system and it's ready to go. So, and I totally get, on probably self-published Amazon, there's a whole bunch of stuff which is clearly just thrown through a model without any kind of quality control, just trying to make whatever money they can off of it. And that's the world we live in, right? Maybe just don't buy on Amazon is my answer. But the thing that I don't like about the term AI slop, so like, I get it, right? Like, people just want to say, it's like, I'm really tired of just seeing a whole bunch of generative AI products in my feed. And I'm like, well, okay, but like, you do kind of control the feed. Like, it seems to me that you decide what you want to engage with, as opposed to you dictate to other people what they can and can't post. And I think the thing that's really started to bother me about the AI slop term is that it's just getting applied to anything made through like an LLM, or the image generating models, or I guess Sora would fall under the image generation models, and this diffusion models. Like, there's an alphabet soup almost now of different techniques, but the sort of stuff that is made by what is broadly termed AI. And I don't think that's remotely fair. I think there are some genuinely interesting applications of these technologies that people are using, and to make like, I'm trying to remember exactly what this project was, but it was, I think, a book of poetry, or it was a collection. Anyways, it was a I think it was like an LLM generating sort of like headlines or news articles about black people. So this is an American-based author, and like, the whole purpose of that work was that it generated a specific set of articles, and you probably are imagining what those articles are. And so I think that's actually a very interesting application of the technology, and I think the fact that it's generated by an LLM makes it interesting. Now, again, it's definitely something a little bit more on the avant-garde side, so like, I can completely understand people not necessarily liking it on its aesthetic merits. I think maybe even people may just dislike it on political grounds, right? Like, I kind of understand that some people are like, why does everything have to be political now? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I think that's actually a fairly reasonable, I maybe don't quite see the politics myself on it, because, the model in theory could have generated other results, and yet it seemed to generate a pretty consistent one in this case here. But I mean, again, like I'll accept, like, not everybody's necessarily going to find this as interesting as I do. And to be honest, like I find it interesting as a concept as opposed to something that I've read myself. But I actually see this as being a fairly thoughtful project, which is still being generated through a series of prompts, right? And yet I know there's a segment of the internet that will say that that's AI slop. And I just think that that is, like, surely at this point where, you know, we have technologies to make games, like any technology you want to make a game is basically available for free. You need to have hardware to run it, and you need to have, you know, I guess the stability of your situation to be able to continue the work. Like, so, you know, if you're homeless, chances are you're not going to sit down and start your game dev career. But I mean, as far as barriers to entry are concerned, like, they're even, you know, they're about as low as they're going to get, short of, you know, the ideal a lot of people are talking about, which is you write a prompt and literally everything is done for you. Which, I mean, let's face it, there's going to be a lot of activity that needs to be rethought if we get to that point. But, you know, I'm just not entirely sure why suddenly bringing the barriers up again is a good idea. I think many of the benefits that we've gotten from these technologies tend to be by enabling more people to be able to do things. And I think part of the contract there is that there is a lot more stuff that isn't interesting to you that comes out. This is absolutely true for Steam. I'd say the vast majority of material on Steam is not interesting to me. And thank goodness that Valve curates the store, contrary to what people believe. I mean, they curate it in the sense that they have their algorithm, right? So, you know, the Steam algorithm, as much as game developers want to complain about it, you know, thank goodness that it exists, because the majority of my time is not spent looking at games that I will never buy. It is spent looking at games that I'm probably better positioned than some of the alternatives to look at, with maybe hopefully a little bit of weird delta in there to, you know, just off the beaten path for me to find things that are interesting. So I don't know, like, what happens if we go back, you know, 10 years and say, oh, that's Unity slop, you know, or, oh, you know, that's Windows slop, you know, you use a Microsoft product, you know, don't you know they enforce, you know, software licenses on people? You know, like, there's all sorts of, like, you can draw that line wherever you really want, but I think it would be fair to say that sort of we're in a better state now than we've ever been in terms of the quality of games and just the volume of games coming out. And that means it's harder for developers. You know, this is what happens when markets become competitive. But I think as a whole, we've benefited from it. And I think if we're really honest about it, smaller creators have benefited from it because of the, you know, the fact that previously it would be impossible to imagine building a career out of making, like, weird little indie stuff, right? Could you imagine something like Crypt of the Necrodancer or Cultist Simulator or, you know, or, I mean, half of the stuff that Clay makes? Could you imagine that working in an age of, like, shareware, right? Like, when the original Doom's coming out. Like, maybe those would be mind-blowing games at that time. But, like, I don't know, at the time... Well, actually, I guess maybe gaming isn't so firmly established in terms of what it should be that... I don't know. Like, it's weird to ask these kinds of questions. But, like, I do think to a certain extent we have different expectations now, which have allowed a lot of the stuff to work. And part of that is because it is much more affordable to make these kinds of games. The one thing I will say is that I think all of the technologies that enabled those games to exist didn't exist at that time. And so as a result, the costs of bringing them to market would almost certainly be higher. So anyways, that was kind of the article that was the talk that I gave. And one of the things that really encouraged me was the person who made that lovely Korean language game sort of said it to me afterwards. Is like, yeah, I actually used AI art to make that, and I said, oh, that's cool. Like obviously, it's like I didn't want it to be like people should go out and make AI art, but what I really liked was that person felt that they were okay, like saying, I actually used this tech to make this game, as opposed to feeling like they needed to keep that a secret or that like someone would yell at them for saying that. So that was the other encouraging one. Anyways, there was a reason I wanted to talk about the local writer or the work writer thing, but I'm gonna get through the Biotechnica request. Please tell security on site that I'm busy and I shouldn't be bothered. I'm not planning on checking out before the weekend. Food should be left at the door at the hour specified on my reservation. Thank you, J. Cope. It wouldn't be a bad idea for me to cycle through the cameras, I don't think. I think this is a little bit better at giving me an escape route rather than ideas of where the bad guys are. This might merit a ping. Okay, seems like a decent enough place to risk it. So yeah, if memory serves, I can't just go directly to her suite. I think I need to go up on the roof and then down. E9, BD, 1K. And then after 1C, I need a 7A 55. Okay. Actually, it's not so clear which one of these gives the FF. Well, I better make a choice soon. I think I got it wrong. Yeah. Real man smell. Oh, got the technical ability. Okay, no 1C after that. So got the BD, but I don't think the BD gets me to the 7A1C. Well, actually, you know. So we do 7A1C FF. Okay. Nightingale work in progress. Dear colleagues, Dr. Isaacson performed an autopsy on the deceased nomads. There is no doubt the cause of the test subjects' deaths was electromagnetic overstimulation. Furthermore, Dr. Isaacson discovered several abnormal changes, such as drastic neurologic growth, for example. Needless to say, for the sake of the Nightingale Project's future, information regarding such side effects should never leave the company. I take this opportunity to remind you of the NDA you have signed and of the penalties that await you should you break it. So yeah, obviously, this is one of the things that I think is kind of interesting to do, is to look at. So again, like this is one of the really overt murder for hire missions, and it's sometimes interesting to see how these oh, I don't want to do that. Excerpts from A History of the Nomads by B.B. Pyers. The first nomad code. Protect and respect your clan, especially your family. 2. You are worth as much as your word. 3. Share with others in your clan. 4. Respect the privacy and well-being of your clan. 5. Never put your clan in danger. 6. Always take an honest pay for honest work. The new nomad code. 1. Protect your family and clan in that order. 2. Do not steal from anyone in your clan. 3. Do not keep for yourself that which may help another in your clan. It's hard to imagine a group less inclined to wandering than farmers, but in fact they were the people who dawned the age of nomads. Natural catastrophes, crops ravaged by bioplagues, armed conflicts and martial law allowing corporations to speculate and privatized land. All this forced them into a life on the road. The first clans recognized as nomadic were the Aldecados and the Jodes, followed shortly after by Snake Nation, Thelis Nation, Folk Nation, Blood Nation, and Metacorp, a total of 7 nations. The nomad nations are divided into tribes, which are subdivided even further into clans and families. A family typically numbers between 10 and 100 people, while the biggest nations can reach up to 1 million. At first, nomad activity was seen as anarchistic and subversive, mostly, as you can imagine, by corporations who quickly realized they wouldn't be able to control them. The biggest irony in all this is that it's thanks to the nomads that our cities were rebuilt after the wars and catastrophes that marked the first half of the 21st century. After all, families come together to build, not to destroy. So I don't want to get too close to the target. But what I'm saying here is I'm looking for the evidence that they do to sort of justify the murder. Pathology of the Badlands. Have you ever dreamed of leaving the city for a life on the road? Has your child ever told you they dream of becoming a nomad adventurer? Mistake! The romanticization of these brave highway pirates is as common as it is harmful. These drifters are not as mysterious or as noble as you might think. No, in fact, they are no different from any criminal organization, although even organization may be a stretch. These wandering bads are no more than chaotic jumbles of trigger-happy anarchists roaming just outside the margins of civilization. Descended primarily from the largely extinct agrarian society of the Californias and beyond, these outsiders have rejected the amenities of modernity and chosen instead a path of bloody revolt. They make rusted trucks and trailers their home, denying themselves and the basic necessities of running water and SCSMs. All the squalor by choice, yet is this yet proof enough of their insanity? Of course, they do manage to scrape together just enough to survive. How do you ask? Without factories, hotels, restaurants, and bars, they attack us, the transports of weapons and food destined for our businesses and dinner tables. As if not shamed enough already, they smuggle psychoactive drugs across our borders, even known murderers and rapists. It's true. And even they themselves are known to whore themselves out for contract killings, the bloodiest and most brutal that no one else would dare to accept. You might think these self-proclaimed rebels, these fighters for a cause, would have some semblance of camaraderie. Nothing could be further from the truth. These scattered gangs of vagabonds and drifters are divided into dozens, if not hundreds, of smaller subgroups who are at each other's throats more often than not. One day they unify to hijack a textile transport, and the next they murder each other in cold blood as they sleep. Even their children join in on the bloodbath. While our kids receive games and toys for their birthdays, theirs are given rifles and rusty blades. But don't blame the children, blame the parents for depriving them of a happy and fulfilling future. And for what? Some illusion of freedom obscured by a shroud of resentment and envy? Each of them has the potential to become a future technician, netwatch agent, or even CEO, but instead they'll die alone in the desert buried under the sand, all for a couple of ennies or a pouch of drugs. Still have romantic dreams of the Badlands? I don't think so.
Wakey.
What? Who the hell are you?
What you find more interesting is who sent me. Remember your little science experiment with the Red Ochre clan? The families send their regards.
I do. I remember well. It was an integral stage in my research. You see, we're working on new antibiotic...
Oh, please. Gonna feed me the story of how sacrifices must be made in the quest to save humanity?
I'm not. I know people like you. Hired plenty myself. And I know you won't let me go. But at least let me back up the test results for future application. These nomads, they're gone regardless. Let their death serve a purpose.
Fine, do it. But don't pull any stunts. Got it?
Security!
Archive conversation, Dr. John Koch and Dr. Fiona Vargas. Hello, Dr. Vargas. I'm contacting you to kindly request logistical support in order to bring my project to life. As a world-renowned scientist yourself, I'm sure you've heard of the groundbreaking Nightingale program, which I'm undertaking as part of my corporate contract. Due to the growing interest in my work among people who unfortunately cannot understand the sacrifice that the work of science demands, I'm looking for a temporary base of operations to continue my research without fear for health or my health or life. I'm certain that an outstanding specialist such as you will understand the great discoveries necessarily require the appropriate conditions, which I desperately lack. Thank you in advance. Hello, Dr. Koch. Indeed, I've heard of the Nightingale program more than I would have liked. For that reason, I must politely but firmly decline your request. My professional practice has always remained true to medical ethics and the well-being of my patients, all of whom without exception, have consented to undergo the care afforded to them. Respect for human life is the foundation of my worldview, which you clearly do not share. Offering you any assistance to continue conducting your research would be in direct conflict with my conscience. Please do not contact me again. I actually don't remember if this was available originally, so yeah, I definitely need to finish her off. Oh, right, this is the roof. So, I mean, I can do it the hard way, but... Yeah, I remember there being a big fight the last time that I did this. But yeah, I don't know, like, obviously, in terms of... I mean, to a certain extent, you know, this is the sort of stuff that there were trials after World War II for, right? In fact, I talked about this in the Outlast episode, but in Montreal, there was actually a hospital which is part of the MK Ultra program, which obviously is such a huge subject of so many conspiracy theories that it can sometimes be hard to bring up. It was a real thing. And there's some really wild stories out of it, like Operation Midnight Climax, where effectively there were like government-run brothels so that they could dose the patrons and see the effects.
Got word Joanne Cook hit the dust. Preem. Nothing I love more than working with pros. Gig's closed. The Eddies are on their way.
And one of the things that was kind of surprising to read about. Let me actually see. I don't want to spend too much time out of the game, but let me see if I can find the reference. I think it was Ewan Cameron. And I kind of want to be careful about this one because I know his family, I think, feels that he was historically blamed for things that other people were responsible for. But let me see if I can find this. Donald Ewan Cameron. So, from the Wikipedia page, he is largely known today for his central role in unethical medical experiments and development of psychological and medical torture techniques for the Central Intelligence Agency. He served as president of the American Psychiatric Association from 1952 to 1953, Canadian Psychiatric Association from 58 to 59, and the American Psychopathological Association 1963, Society of Biological Psychiatry in 1965, and the World Psychiatric Association 61 to 66. Now, he was called to do, it was in one of the Nuremberg trials, I think he was called, oh yeah, it says here, so psychiatric evaluation of Rudolf Hess. Definitely wrote a lot of stuff about the Nazis. And I'm trying to remember if he had anything to do. I think had sort of theories of society, but I'm trying to remember. I don't think he had anything to do with this idea of establishing yeah, I'm not so sure that he had anything to do with the establishment of sort of rules regarding consent to experimentation. But I definitely believe it was this time that we actually started the things that we rely on now, as a standard of consent with regards to experimentations. Like the idea that you can't have a doctor who, tells you, oh yeah, just try this pill, and it turns out that you're like the control or treatment group for some experiment. Like, no, you have to agree to that. All of that kind of comes out around the same time. So, I mean, the thing is, when you talk about the Nazis, that's the one that is the universally agreed bad. And I mean, like, designed almost out of central casting to look the part, right? Like, evil-looking uniforms, evil actions, but they're not the only ones who have done this sort of stuff. And it can sometimes be interesting. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to highlight the way that I feel about that particular mission. Like, the idea of experimenting on people, and particularly in the context of Cyberpunk, where, this is clearly, like, this would basically be like finding out a company like Pfizer found a vulnerable group to do experiments on to get a drug out. Sorry to pick on Pfizer, obviously, but
Sweet ride around these parts. How about you bring her home? Already know how it's done.
But like, people would be appalled to find out about this and would immediately call. I mean, like, for all I know, that would be the sort of thing where you would actually see the business probably broken up, sold into parts, and it would cease to have the name. Like, the name would become so toxic that anybody who picked it up would essentially be having to completely restructure the company and would be investing heavily into reforming it from its really dismal reputation. Like kind of an Enron or a WorldCom situation, right? Like, I think WorldCom eventually went on to be something like MCI or something like that. But like, nobody thinks of it that, like, the whole rebranding exercise is specifically to stop them from stop people from recognizing the scandal that it was associated with. Well, this is going to get interesting with the cops in a bit.
Okay, she's ours. On the internet.
Call you back.
Well, that's not a good start. Okay, time to use a tried and true tactic. Give it a little kiss. I don't think that's going to be enough, but... yeah, it's not going to let me in.
Shit, got someone on your ass.
I'll try and outrun him first. Yeah, so, like, the one thing I don't want to do is minimize, you know, like, obviously if you say, oh, well, it's just nomads, like, you are about as bad as the person that you just killed in the mission. If you, you know, it's obviously, just because it's not Mengele does not mean that it's, you know, any less evil. I think maybe it could be, like, this will make me seem just so impossibly naive, but, like, I think maybe there's this side of me that sort of has that extrajudicial side of it, that I sort of feel something like that really does need to actually be handled by a legal authority, or, like, exposed by a media or something like that. But obviously, the presence of a mission like this is a comment on the type of world that Cyberpunk exists in, right? That I suspect the Nomads would feel that even if a good media were to get a hold of that particular story, there would be the "it's just Nomads" kind of response. But yeah, like I said, I will confess the straight up murder missions are always ones that I've always found a little uncomfortable with. I've been a little uncomfortable with, and it's always kind of interesting to see how the game tries to make me feel better about the things that I'm doing, and whether or not it succeeds at it, because I'm still not 100% sure. I'm still not 100% sure how I feel about it, even though, you know, in all... Actually, you know what? Sorry, there is one other important detail, which is the game really brings it home that this is a bad person, but the reason often that you will kill the person is because they didn't stay true to their word on the on, like, copying the data. And it's like, okay, you know, they're trying to live, right? Like, I can't find that all that blameless. But you know, the real, like,
Oh, yeah, I knew I picked the right merc for the gig. My man will take care of the rest.
You're
Check the drop point, your reward. Don't spend it all on XPDs and glitter.
the judgment that from the other scientist that says, you know, what you're doing is spectacularly unethical. Like, you cannot experiment on human beings without their consent. You know, that's only revealed after you've actually killed the person. Like, you've taken, like, to me, I guess to a certain extent, it's a funny set of ethics that says, you know, well, I've taken the murder for hire contract, and I'm now finding out that the person I'm going after was a bad person, and I find the, like, most damning, arguably the most damning evidence, after I've already done the deed. So now I can feel good about what I did. I'm just not entirely sure that moral calculus really works for me. Although, again, I mean, it's also sort of hard. Like, in the guinea pigs, I mean, the mission is called guinea pigs, right? So, like, I guess in theory I should not feel that bad about the target from the intro. I don't know. I just want to be the nice criminal. Let me see if I can get the bit on satire out of the way. So one of the things that's kind of fun about the writers group at work is that they'll, like, sometimes it'll be a talk about what we're reading and writing, sometimes it'll be sharing a piece for critique, and sometimes it will be talks on a particular topic. And I'm not really well, so again, I always feel I'm a bit lucky whenever I'm in communities that are
Yo. Just wondering what you've got on hand.
This is mostly just so I can sell off the surplus. Should probably just start by looking for all the funny color items. So again, following the same principle, if there's like, so we've got two examples here. Now this one is tier 5, tier 5. So I'd sell this one off, but normally I would, I mean, so arguably I should hang on to this one, upgrade it, and then sell this one, but I'm just going to hang on to the highest level one. So anyways, I think this coming week, I get to do a presentation on satire. Now, I think originally the topic was going to be comedy, and then I was going to do sort of a follow-up to try and distinguish comedy and satire, because I actually think there's a meaningful difference between the two that should be preserved. I think the order wound up being a little funny on this. The challenge is, the reason why I wanted to bring that up was there was something about satire in 2077. Oh. Hey V, I'm in Dogtown. Let's meet, please. Sending coordinates. Come alone. Glad to hear you're alive. Just come. It's important. I wish I remembered who this person was. I think what I'll do is I will go into the area. I think probably the effort to talk about satire is not quite... I think I should probably just stow it, try and remember it for next week. I'm sorry today's been kind of all over the map. I'd actually argue the week has been all over the map. And clearly my health is partly to blame, but so much of the talk at the start was how that is still a responsibility on my part, even if, I mean, again, I'm not gonna beat myself up too much about it, right? I do acknowledge that I'm not going to be able to control when I get sick in like all cases, but I do think it is fair to say that I should be careful with oh, no entry. Gotta follow the rules. I should minimize the number of opportunities I have to wind up sick. You know, being up very late, you know, working longer than I need to or should. Sorry, I gotta sneeze. These particular things are in my control, and I should be keeping a closer look at it. So, I'm starting to converge on a couple of things that are nice intermediate ones. Just part of it is just to sort of shake up the stuff that I'm doing. The one problem is that the two games that I've done this week, Doom Eternal and Cyberpunk, are like they're a complete switch in the other way. So much so that like it's kind of an out of character set. I don't think I've ever had a point where every day of the week has been dedicated to sort of a Pepe, thanks again. Maybe I don't know everything about Cynthia, but I know she loves me. Fuck everything else, right? Oh, right, this is the bartender. This is the drawback about taking a really long time between the missions. But yeah, so the one thing I will say, I think like variety is good. I'm not entirely sure it's a good idea for me to have all big mainstream like AAA games. Not that I feel like I don't see a whole lot of value in saying like, oh, it's an indie only stream or something, but I don't know. I don't know if I have a whole lot of added value for just doing stuff like this on, fully. I do think like, because I have done the Elder Scrolls, there's a little bit of a connection there. And I think RPGs do have enough of an overlap with some of the things that I know people like. A little bit harder to say with Doom Eternal, but yeah, there's a couple of strategy games I'd like to try and fold into the mix. Definitely, this was not a week for me to do anything that required too much brain power, as I learned with Doom Eternal. But I think probably, unless I hear like a strong feeling to the contrary, I will do more Cyberpunk and hopefully talk a little bit more about Cyberpunk itself on Fridays at least. I'm not opposed to adding a couple of extra days to catch up inside of Cyberpunk, but I'm going to need to have a think about that. If you would like to see more or less Doom Eternal, please let me know about that. And I'm trying to, so there's definitely some other big mainstream sort of things that I can add into the mix, but there's also a couple of smaller games that I can put in, and I'm trying to figure out what the best fit is, because I know if I do a one game each day, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, that does carry the drawback that I spend a lot of time doing each of those games on a, like it just takes me a really, really long time to get through all of them. So I think if I'm going to do sort of a strategy game, that should be one I spend more time on, or alternatively just sort of accept that that's going to be a tent pole for the week, and then maybe make like the Wednesday and the Friday more variable. I don't know. I'll figure it out. But if there's something that's working for you or something that isn't, feel free to let me know, because I'm obviously in a little bit of flux, and it's been a rough couple of streams after Book of Hours, just because of my own personal circumstances, as opposed to anything about the games themselves. Although I'm sure I'm also probably a bit rusty on some of these things. Anyways, I know I've been hosting her a few times, but Prosciutto Fist has really been enjoying Avowed, and I'd like to try and show some support where I can. So I'm going to leave you in her hands. I'm going to figure out what my life is about. And I don't know. I should get some sleep reasonably soon, I think, but I do have a couple of things that I want to wrap up before I call it for the evening. So I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. I'm going to record some more Book of Hours sometime over this weekend. I'm going to try and put some thought in terms of what the schedule will look like for the mainstream for the next few weeks, but at the moment I'm not too opposed to just playing it by ear, especially when I've been feeling a bit crummy, because it's been nice to have that variety. But I think probably we can count on Cyberpunk on the Fridays until future. Anyways, have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you all on Monday.